About ready to get started. We have a couple of folks who just walked in, so let me let them get settled in. We'll officially gavel. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 7, 2023 meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Transportation Planning Organization, Hillsborough County. I'm Rick Fernandez. I'm the chair of the committee. And as has been our practice now for quite some time, we'll go around the room. Everyone will introduce themselves, please, along with their identification of appointing authority. We can start on my left here with Stephen.
Hey guys, I'm Stephen Hollenkamp, City of Plant City.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Brown and I was appointed by Commissioner Myers.
Jim Davison, appointed by Commissioner Wastel.
Hey, Yassine, appointed by the city of Temple Terrace.
I'm Bill Roberts. I was appointed by the aviation authority.
Terrence Trot is not appointed, African American at large.
Sarah Thomas, at large from Brandon.
Chris Vella, Native American at large. Ed Majewski, appointed by the Expressway Authority.
Christina Bosworth, member at large for the Vermont area.
Don Skelton, appointed by the board.
John Frank, Hillsborough County School Board.
Johnny Wong, TPO staff and CAC liaison.
And as I said at the top, my name is Rick Fernandez. I don't think I announced my appointing authority. However, I'm the Hispanic at large representative, which means this committee is my appointing authority. That said, might we have the secretary call the roll, please?
Of course, Rick Fernandez,
Here.
Bill Roberts,
Here.
Jim Davidson,
Here.
Carolyn Brown,
Present.
Hoyt Prindle, Sherry Southwell, Aya Yassine,
Present.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Here.
Nicole Rice, Artie Fryer, Nancy Castellano, Don Skelton,
Here.
Ed Majewski,
Here.
Terrence Trott,
Present.
Joshua Frank,
Present.
Christina Bosworth, Chris Vella,
Here.
Sarah Thomas,
Here.
Kit Waremeyer, Chris Gonzalez,
Present,
and your virtual?
correct.
Thank you. We do have an in-person quorum. Chair, would you call for a vote of consent for remote participation?
There's such a motion from the floor.
Second.
Jim Davison gives me a motion for remote participation. Is there a second?
Second.
Right, Yassine gives me a second. Is there any discussion? Can I have a vote for by acclamation, please? All in favor, aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And if my notes are correct, we have one person virtual tonight. Is that correct? Just Chris?
Sure.
Yes, sir. That's what I have so far. I'll let you know if anybody else comes in. I do have one phone number that doesn't have a name associated.
All right, so the one virtual that we know of at the moment is Chris Gonzalez, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, I guess that leaves us to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room? I don't see anyone. Anyone online?
I don't see anything in the chats. No participants have their hands raised that I can see. So I think that's.
All right, well, if anybody pops up in the next couple of minutes, we'll come back to it. That takes us to the chair's report on our agenda item. Just a couple of points I want to highlight. First of all, thank you for those of you that made the effort to be here tonight. This is the best in-person attendance I think we have had since COVID hit. So congratulations to all of you for making the effort. And this no coincidence. This is the meeting when we reviewed the annual TIP Transportation Improvement Program. arguably one of the more important meetings of the year for us. So nice time for everybody to show up and be part of the family. So thank you for that. I will note that the board, our mother board, TPO board, will meet on June 14th. A week from tonight, 6 p.m. They will mirror us in terms of scheduling on time. They'll be downstairs in the second floor chamber. Anyone that wishes to attend and give comment on the tip, certainly you're invited to do so, or on anything else. It was noteworthy to me that on the consent agenda for the next meeting, the TPO board has 2 new CAC members that are up for consideration and approval. One is Dana Lazarus, who has been nominated by Councilwoman Hurtek, who happens to be back in the gallery here to see what we are about. Thank you, Council, for appearing today and for giving us a nomination. Dana, for anyone who doesn't know, has been on this committee before. I think she'll bring some good experience. The other nominee designate is, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Leah Lachinor. Even close.
I'm gonna take a stab and say Ilya Lachinov.
Okay.
Is that? Yeah. Well, welcome.
Oh, you're here. Okay.
It's great.
You want to say your name your way?
Yeah, Ilya Lachinov.
Hi, Ilya. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Congratulations on your almost appointment. And thank you for your interest in being here today. Is there anything we already took public comment, but was there anything you might want to say?
Sorry, I don't have to.
Okay, that's fine. That's not fair, but you know, extemporaneous for 3 minutes. If you wanted to sing and dance, you can do that. Okay, let's see. Was there anything else here? One of the status reports that will be presented at the TPO board next week will be on the executive director search, which is continuing. I'm not sure at what stage they are now. Johnny, you might be able to amplify on that.
So the list of candidates meeting the preferred qualifications were emailed out to TPO board members, and board members were asked to score them on some criteria. They were to submit their responses to Megan Attorney, who's our human resources staff, and I believe on June 14th, they're going to identify maybe 5 plus or minus 1 semifinalists. They'll invite back to a virtual interview on July 29th.
So those names will be announced in the sunshine for all to hear, presumably with some background information available to review.
I'm not sure whether the resumes are going to be circulated publicly or not. My understanding is that just the list of semifinalists will be announced.
Chairman, who's the representative from this committee in that search?
There isn't one.
So the search was conducted internally and had decided to do that as opposed to hiring an outside headhunting agency. So they posted the job opportunity on the website, and TPO board members were asked to send candidates to human resources if they thought they'd be good candidates. I believe that there were 15 applicants in total, and I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 had the preferred qualifications. So of that, 10 to 12, a little less than half will be announced next Wednesday.
But I think your question was, is there anyone from this committee that's part of the
So
search?
originally, they were inviting a member of this committee to partake in the selection process.
Well, originally, a member of this committee was asking that we be invited. That would be me. And actually, Council Hurtek brought it up at a meeting, I think 2 months ago, that a member of the CAC be part of the search committee. For whatever reason, that suggestion fell on deaf ears and no further action was taken on it. So we're a little less in the dark than the rest of the community is, or at least going to be getting some updates. And we know it's happening, which is a good thing. But we're not going to be part of the interview process unless somebody changes their mind at the 11th hour. Okay, I think that was it as far as chair report items. Let's see. All right, that takes us to approval of minutes. got a small novel worth of minutes to get through tonight. For various reasons, probably the most significant of which is we did not have quorum for a couple of meetings. We have 3 meetings worth of minutes to approve. March 1, April 5, and May 3. Is there a motion from the floor to approve these 3 en masse?
Motion.
Second.
Aya gives us a motion to approve all 3 en masse. Jim Davidson gives us a second. Is there any discussion on the en masse approval of these 3 minutes? See none in the room. I hear nothing coming from our virtual space. Does Chris have anything to say?
Can't see anything in the chat. Chris doesn't have seen it.
All right, then. So for the approval of the March 1, April 5, and May 3 minutes as were included in your agenda packs, vote by acclamation. All in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay? Secretary, please note that is a unanimous approval. That now takes us to the action items. We're at item 7 of our agenda. Hillsborough County Bicycle Network Evaluation. Wade Reynolds.
All right, wait, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I think I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Okay. There we are. Good evening, CAC. I hope you're able to see this all right.
Yeah.
This is the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network plan. We started on this journey about a little over a year ago, and this has been a collaboration between the TPO and the county, particularly the Public Works Department. The objective was to evaluate the existing network and establish a data-driven approach to prioritize roadways for improvements. And then we demonstrated how this could work into project development through 4 conceptual plans on different roadways around the county. So again, the goal is to create a repeatable process where we could look at the priority, come back and identify improvements that could be put there under the county's Complete Streets Guide. So phase 1 of this project was coming in with a bunch of data and coming up with a prioritization methodology. We had 3 major categories of data input. Those are risk factors, exposure factors, and network factors. The risk factors includes crash history, the speed, the volume of traffic, the number of lanes, and the presence of lighting. Exposure factors includes activity generators such as schools, high-density residential developments, proximity to bus stops, and equity and social justice component in that factor as well. And network factors include the distance from an existing bicycle facility, the presence of sidewalks, the connectivity of those roadways, and the context classification under the comprehensive plan and the Complete Streets Guide. So just a little bit more on those factors and how we brought them in. I won't go through each one of these descriptions, but we ultimately combined these 3 scores and came up with a segment prioritization score by combining them. So once we did that, we had 4 categories, or we divided them into 4 categories: low, moderate, high, and very high. They're just quartiles of the data. You can see that many of the higher priority areas in this slide are where the higher density residential development is and where our higher volume roadways are as you sort of have the population centers, which is not surprising. So then after we had prioritized everything, we came up with, or we set out to select 4 corridors. So we wanted some geographic diversity in those, and we wanted to try to look at ones in different mobility fee districts. As you may know, the county is divided up into 5 districts where mobility fees collected from new development should be spent. So we wanted to get some geographic diversity on that, and I believe we hit 4 out of the 5 districts there. So the selected corridors at that point were Waters Avenue from Sheldon Road to the Veterans Expressway, Causeway and Lumsden Boulevard from just west of I-75 into Brandon near where the Summit Expressway ends, Balm Riverview Road, and Shell Point Road. So those concept developments for each selected corridor, we first reviewed the existing conditions, then we identified potential improvements, sort of the grab bag of improvements from the county's tiered complete streets guide, and developed these concepts. With Waters Avenue, and just a little background on this segment of Waters, immediately west of Sheldon Road is the trailhead for the Upper Tampa Bay Trail. So the connectivity to that and from the major commercial activity on Waters and residential areas on either side of that over to that trailhead is a important connection to make. So this road has speed limits 35 and 45 miles per hour. It's typically 6 through lanes throughout the corridor. It does have a median. The volume's about 55,000 vehicles per day, which for context is pretty similar to the last time I looked at the volume for Fowler Avenue. So this does handle a lot of vehicles. It's home to 2 HART routes, Route 16 and 30. And there are a few mid-block crossings and a long distance between signalized crossings in this location. There are existing bicycle facilities, Sharrows, as you approach Sheldon Road, and then it turns into conventional bike lanes from there to the Veterans Expressway. There are sidewalks on both sides and numerous commercial driveways, which can make using the sidewalks very difficult as you have to cross those. So looking at the tiered improvements on this, I won't go through each one of these, but just to mention the tier 1 improvements, what you'll see in all of these concept plans is a lot of pavement markings, which are inexpensive, signage, which is inexpensive, modifying the signalization timing is still inexpensive. And then from there, it gets more difficult and more expensive. For tier 2, when you look at the price of mid-block crossings, a little over $1 million a piece. Transit improvements. We have proposed a speed study for this because, as you'll see with on-street facilities, and the existing speeds often exceeding the posted speeds on this roadway. And tier 3, looking at some access management, which can involve removing multiple driveways and looking at some cross connections between commercial developments, as well as lighting improvements throughout the corridor. Those are high ticket items, and you'll see some similar recommendations in the other corridors as well moving forward. So this would be the existing condition on Waters Avenue. You can see the 6 lanes and the conventional bike lanes and sidewalks on the outside. And the proposed, we have proposed to narrow the travel lanes and offer some buffering there. We do have prices in the report for how we can further improve that buffering by adding what are called armadillos or some vertical delineation posts in there, as well as green paint at the driveways and intersections to call out those higher intensity locations. I just show you this because this is what the conceptual plan documents look like. This is the segment approaching Sheldon Road on the top. You can see there the mid-block crossing at the top right proposed, and crossing improvements in the lower right proposed as well, along with that green paint. And those improvements are carried down the corridor. Moving on to Causeway Boulevard and Lumsden Road. This is about a 2-mile segment, 45 miles an hour, and the laneage varies from 6 to 10 throughout this. It does have a median and handles about 27,000 vehicles per day. Again, 2 transit routes on this segment, no mid-block crossings, and there are shoulders, but no existing bicycle facilities. There is a big gap in the sidewalks. And this also has the additional challenge of having a bridge that crosses I-75, which I'll get into in a moment. So again, the tiers here, we have our lower cost tier, pavement markings, repairing the sidewalks, adding wayfinding signage, going towards the Brandon Town Center. Tier 2, what I really want to draw your focus to is the this concept calls for shared use paths and for further separation from the roadway, and has 2 concepts for crossing I-75. One would be a separate bridge alignment on the south side of the roadway bridges where there's adequate right-of-way on either side to make that connection. That comes in at almost $8 million. Alternative 2 would be to reconfigure the roadway and continue the pathways on the shoulder of the existing bridge and taking some out of the median on that bridge. That's an even actually more expensive concept at almost $13 million. Surprisingly, a new structure could potentially be a lower cost structure in this case. But as I said, these are conceptual plans. They are not funded or prioritized at this time. This is showing how it could be done under this concept. And again, looking at tier 3, lighting and additional shared use path proposals going down this corridor. So the existing, you can see the sidewalks on the far outside, drainage facilities, 6 to 7 lanes of traffic. And then the proposed would be to widen those to shared use paths on the outside and maintain that traffic, except as I mentioned, where we would cross I-75. And again, here are those concept plans just to give you an idea of what they would look like on this corridor. You have those enhanced crossings. On the bottom one, you can see the Gornto Lake Drive and how the green paint is carried across those intersections for to show how those bike lanes continue through that intersection. Moving on to Shell Point Road. This goes from US 41 to 24th Street Southeast. There is an existing portion of the, this connects to the South Coast Greenway Trail, which is also part of the Regional Gulf Coast Trail at the community college there at the eastern end of this segment. The speed limit is 40 miles per hour out here. It is 2 lanes with the occasional turn lane, handles about 10,500 vehicles per day as of 2019. And as I said, short segments of that shared use path. The gap, particularly as you will see in the bottom picture there, the sidewalk gap at the railroad is a particularly challenging one, and it gets enough traffic that it has worn a deep pathway into the ground there. So again, we went through the tiers of these improvements, similar to the previous ones, but I'll skip to, well, I'll just first say adding the shared use path on the north side throughout, filling sidewalk gaps. There are some mid-block crossing proposals and lighting as well. The existing section on this with the sidewalk through most of the corridor on one side, and then the proposed segment with the shared use path continuing on the north side and the sidewalk completed on the south side. It's probably a good time to just say that not all of these improvements that are noted with every one of these would have to be done at once or done at all for any of these, but it is a holistic approach that we took towards the corridors on these conceptual planning documents. So again, just looking at the plan sheets for Shell Point Drive, you can see on the bottom sheet where it hooks up with the existing trail on Shell Point Road and goes over to the community college just east of that location. Moving on to Balm Riverview Road, this does have sidewalks on both sides. The speed limit is 45 miles per hour with no shoulder and no bicycle facilities. And it handles about 17,000 vehicles per day. So there is no transit service and there are no mid-block crossings here, except at, of course, the intersections, which are not mid-block. Again, we went through this. The proposal here is for a widening the sidewalk to a shared use path on one side. And there are additional proposals for lighting, crosswalk improvements, access management, and school zone safety at the north end of this. So again, the existing section of the roadway with sidewalks on both sides, the Gold 2-lane road, and the widened shared use path, widened sidewalk into a shared use path on the east side of the roadway. And again, these are the plan sheets. The north, or the top one, which is also the northernmost segment, is the location of that school, and that would be running alongside the school there, which is the reason for that mid-block crossing in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. So the next steps would be to move forward with engineering design review, and then to prioritize and then request funding for design, develop more formal and detailed cost estimates, and then once those are in place, really moving out with some public engagement on these corridors, and then identifying funding for any projects that were prioritized. So with that, I will end and just say that we are asking for your support for the board on this, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments you may have. Thank you.
Wade, thank you. As usual, presentation very well done. You're a 5-star all the time, so thank you for your effort. Before we go to Q&A, and there is some interest around the table, procedurally, just a little bit of a nuance here. I want to be clear on where we are on this before we jump into the questions. I don't see this item on the board agenda for next week, yet it is an action item for us. So I'm curious from the procedural standpoint, if we recommend action, if we're positive in our recommendation, where is it going and when is it going there? Because the board isn't going to be looking at it next week.
No, sir. August is what we have it scheduled for, and that is because of the TIP hearing and then the recess in July. Okay, so we're being asked to make a recommendation now for something the board will review and consider 2 months from now. Okay. Yes, sir. Fair enough. All right. As I said, we do have some Q&A. Are you ready? Yes, sir. Always fun here. Okay, let me start on the left side of the room. I see Aya hand up, and I see Jim. Is that a hand up, or you just waving it?
No,
Hand up. Okay. Aya, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. Yassine, City of San Terrace. I just wanted to ask a question about, have you considered speed reduction in your proposals as well?
Yes, speed studies and speed reductions are recommended in at least 2 of these corridors. Waters Avenue is one of them. But yes, that is part of the, that is a recommendation of at least 2. I would need to look back at the report to be more detailed on that.
The reason I'm asking is because it wasn't in the schedule that you presented, so I wasn't sure if it was or not. So you need to do a study. That will be a recommendation to do a study for the corridors before you actually recommend the reduction or not.
The lane narrowing on at least the Waters Avenue segment would be part of justifying a speed reduction. But yes, we would need to do additional study on that before we would we would recommend a speed reduction. And I think that we would want to have some engineering reasons for doing it and some techniques to reduce that speed other than just changing the sign.
Thank
Okay.
you.
You good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Jim Davis?
Yes, Wade, thank you very much. This is a county project,
Yes, sir.
and that would mean the county is going to be liable for the finances. You laid out about $70 to $80 million in projects over all the tiers included.
Yes, sir. These are all on county roads, and any improvements that the county chose to move forward with, they would either need to look for grant funding or use county funding for that. Yes, sir.
And where did because I'm new to the CAC here, where did the impetus to do this study come from?
It was requested by the Board of County Commissioners
Board of County Commissioners. You know when that was?
about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Yes, sir.
Okay. And is there any idea about were the neighborhoods that you looked at, has anyone gone out and asked them if they were interested or looked favorable at this before the study was presented, or was it just a request by the board?
It was a request by the board, and we have not gone out with public outreach on this. We would recommend that that be done, and the report does recommend that that be done before or as part of the design and additional steps in this. Yes, sir.
I bring that up because it's a lot of money.
It is.
And money has been spent already in doing it. And the city of Tampa has done several of these, and particularly one in New Tampa, where they wanted to do a complete streets of Tampa Palms Boulevard. And it was in the several millions of dollars. And they never came out and asked the people until they already did the study. If they had come out and asked the people before they did the study, they could have saved a fortune. And you may want to go back, and if you identify a corridor, that may be where you wish to start before you go down. You don't have to have that level of detail to really get an idea of what the people in those neighborhoods want. And $80 million for this is going to be a hard sell. And I just thought I'd throw that in there because the people in New Tampa said they didn't want the complete streets. And it was being done on a road that never had a fatality and never had a bicycle accident. So you may want to go back and look at that and talk to the people first, then look at the study.
Okay. Terrence, question? Terrence Trot.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a project that's near and dear to my heart. It's a roundabout at the intersection of Sims and Balm Riverview. I was just wondering how that would play into this. Can one support the other, speed each other up? And that speed question is outstanding because it's 45 on Balm Riverview, and that's it's outrageous. Riverview High School sits right there. And I know that a bike facility would be much appreciated there also. So just that first part about the roundabout, do you know how they would play together, two different projects? Because
I am not familiar with that project. Is that a funded project?
well, according to the sheet here, design and land acquisition is scheduled for late 2023, project completion or procurement completion early 2024, and construction completion late 2024.
Sounds funded to me. Into next year. Wow. It certainly one would not negate the other. I think roundabouts are always a safer way to slow traffic down at intersections. Of course, there's always a right place and right time for that. No, I would say that's certainly a complementary project, but again, these are conceptual and not funded or prioritized at this time.
All right, I don't know if there's anything that came from this study that you can provide to the roundabout team, because since you're working on, making the bike lanes and everything, I assume they'd be around the roundabout, and whatever design you guys are going to come up with or ideas you come up with could possibly help that project. Thank you.
Thank you.
You good? All right, any more questions from the left side of the room? Stephen, I didn't mean to ignore you.
No.
Just look right past you. Okay, over here to the right, the conservative side of the room. Let's start with Chris Vella. That fits. Go ahead, Chris.
Ultra conservative Chris. Thank you for the presentation. So I do have a couple of issues. I read the 168-page report that you used to put this together. And I wanted to find out, when you look at equity as scoring these roads, are you essentially saying that improvements couldn't go to, I guess, less poor neighborhoods? Or is poor neighborhoods taking like a priority? And the reason why I'm saying this, and it kind of goes to another point here, it seems like the county is looking at the worst roads that we have. But these roads, and I tally up the numbers, it was under $40 million, but it's quite a bit of money, and I feel like we could do a lot more with that money throughout the whole network, right? I mean, we really want to bring that vision zero to every single neighborhood. So when you guys were talking about equity, I wanted to find out like where that came from. Two, I wanted to find out about the mobility fee. I know that it's broken into like 4 parts of the county, but how much money is in those? Well, let me just say this: how much money is appropriated to that fee to support this? And then another comment I have is, why do you rank suburban areas over urban areas?
For those, Chris, I'm sorry, were those 3 separate questions?
3 separate questions.
All
Yes.
right. Wade, can you handle those? Siri?
Yes, sir. I took some notes and I think I can answer at least 2 of them. I'll start with the one I can't answer, which is how much money is in the mobility district fund. I don't have any idea how much is in each mobility district or as a whole. We would need to ask Public Works for that information. Having said that, the equity, so those are up to 5 points out of all of these points that the segment is within or directly adjacent to an underserved community. Scoring was based on the equity factor scoring for each census block. So it is a part of the prioritization, but not the only part, I guess, is my answer to that. I don't know if that really answers your question or not, Chris.
Where did you get that from? I'm just curious, like just the ranking, is that something that was a standard from AppDOT, or is that something that you guys developed in-house?
No, it's a criterion that we thought was important to include.
Okay. I just don't want to think that just because someone bikes labels them to a certain economic levels. And that's what I'm getting at from here. And that's,
Okay.
class is bad. It's just, I don't want to put that staple because we really should have a countywide bicycle friendly approach. You know what I'm saying? And that's, I understand there's a ranking to that, but we got to avoid some of the labeling. And that's when I get a little concerned. And I would love for you guys to kind of reevaluate, and I can talk more in depth with you directly about that.
And to answer your last question, which is regarding the urban versus suburban character of these locations, I guess within unincorporated county, you know, I'm not sure what one would consider more urban than Brandon maybe, and I'm always happy to hear suggestions on that, but I do think they are reasonable examples of the different types of roadways in unincorporated county. I think Waters is relatively urban as far as unincorporated county goes, and I pretty much feel the same way about Causeway and Lumsden. I agree, as you get down to Shell Point and Balm Riverview, it is becoming it is transitioning to more suburban and rural, but we chose these corridors to try and give a good cross section of the different types of roadways in the unincorporated county.
Right. And I see that geographically it's divided. It's just concerning because item number 4, the tip is looking to widen Baum Road, and it's around the area, it's not Baum River, but we're having some road widening that was discussed in that area, and I keep on thinking, I'm a firm believer of Vision Zero, but I'm not a firm believer of billing out sprawling developers who support these large roads, and then we have to spend $22 million for 2 miles to fix them. You see where I'm at, and we could take that $22 million and service several neighborhoods. And I just feel like this whole metric that you guys are doing, I get it, but from a value standpoint, it's really widespread road safety. I just don't see it. So I'm just a little concerned with that. But again, we can talk more in depth since you guys developed that in-house.
Okay, are we good with the questions
Yeah.
at this point? All right. I'm just gonna keep going down the aisle here. Ed, did you have anything? Christina Bosworth?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Wade. It's a great presentation. I have one thing that's a concern, and then I have a couple of questions. My first concern is on the factors and scoring. That I was looking at one road. I'm an avid cyclist. I bicycle all the time, both for leisure and for pleasure and for commuting. So I looked at one of the roads that I cycle on often that is just a horrible road, and it's ranked moderate. And when I was looking at the factors that make this a very dangerous road, they weren't considered. When you looked at sidewalk factors, what was not in the breaks in sidewalk, the actual, whether there is a sidewalk was included, but some of these sidewalks, I don't know if you can see my hand wave, you go up and down and around this tree and then down again and then up and around a pole. You cannot traverse those sidewalks on a bicycle. It's absolutely impossible. And this particular road, Apollo Beach Boulevard, I ride this road often now because once Paseo El Mar was finished, and now it is an activity. What was that? One of your activity generator? It's an activity generator now because people ride it to the bay. Beautiful park on the bay. So, but it's rated moderate. It also has no shoulders, and I didn't see in the factors and scoring whether or not there's a shoulder on the road to be taken into consideration. This road doesn't even have sharrows. You have to ride in the middle of the lane with no sharrows or anything. So that's my concern, is that some of the factors that make some of these roads very difficult for bicyclists were not taken into consideration. And then my questions are, I'd like to know how often you're going to be doing this study, because residential density is rapidly increasing in Southern Hillsborough County. For example, County Road 579, that's currently rated moderate. But very soon there are going to be thousands more homes along County Road 579. And in my opinion, if you're going to use this study, that it should be redone, particularly in that part of the county, in 5 years. So my question is, how often are you planning to do this?
We have no plans at this time to repeat it unless we are requested to by one of our local governments that we serve.
Okay. And my next question is corridor selection. There's 5 mobility districts, but you only chose 4. So my question is, why was District 5 left out? District 5 is where all the new mobility fees are being generated. That's where all the new construction is, where the new developments are going in. That's where all the mobility fees are being generated, but there's no benefit in that district for bicycle improvements. So that's a question why that was left out. But I want to state that I'm going to vote yes on the action item because the areas designated for improvements are needed. But I have concerns about the study and particularly about District 5 being left out. I will say that those areas, I bike Baum River View and I bike Shell Point, and they're both very scary roads to bike on. I would love to see those improvements. And I also, as a bicyclist, to Terrence's point, I prefer going through a roundabout as a bicyclist as opposed to an intersection. It's much, much safer for me. So if you could just tell me, and I'm done, why District 5 is not included?
We were scoped for 4 corridors. We tried to find one that would cross 2 districts to cover that, but with the higher risk scores. We did not come up with any that really crossed, and we coordinated with our partners at Public Works, and those were the 4 we came up with. It was not intentional to leave out the 5th district. We certainly would be happy to look at anything down there as well.
Okay, thank you. We're closing in on the end of our time window for this item. So Josh, you're next.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put a finer point on it. I think this methodology is incredibly flawed. If you can go back to your page that shows your network table, yes, this one. And the biggest flaw is the county has a lot of roads in the city limits, and for those not to be included in any of your factoring, I think is just a huge whiff. If you want to look at everything from exposure to network, that's where the highest volume is. That's where the most existing network is. That's where the highest risk factors are because of sheer population density and the trip generators that are within the city of Tampa limits. So to not have the city of Tampa within the study, I think is why we see 4 incredibly disparate corridors selected. And I'm having a really hard time understanding, not only to Jim's point, some of the others, why these neighborhoods were selected and why these corridors were selected. Yeah, Waters is terrible, but it might have 5 cyclists on it a week. Whereas County Road Waters within the city limits has a significant amount of bike cyclists and users on it and is not even considered in the study. So I think leaving that hole in the analysis is the reason why we're having such issues at this point. And I want to also add that I'm really, I'm going to vote no for this for one simple fact, and that is, unless there is a big red stamp on this concept or on the process that says if the speed limit is not reduced, there will be structure to protect the bike lanes, I can't support it. I'm drawing and designing trails and bike lanes and projects in Florida, elsewhere, and around the country. And if the speed limit is higher than 25 miles an hour, it is considered negligent to not include armadillos or some Jersey barriers or something, anything, putting it up on the curb, even as a multi-use path. And so I think by not having the network and by putting these places in suburban areas with high speed limits, you're just asking for more crashes. And that's the opposite of what Vision Zero is. So unless there's that caveat put in place, I can't support it. It's just fundamentally flawed.
I certainly understand your position. I can answer the first part of that, which is that we have a separate study going on right now for county roads within the city limits.
Okay, but if network is a priority and risk and exposure, should these 2 things not work together?
Well, I understand your point, but studying the same roads concurrently twice with 2 separate projects, we were trying to avoid that.
Okay, is there any question from the virtual space? Chris Gonzalez or anyone else that may have signed on? Okay, we had 30 seconds.
Getting back to Josh,
Jim Davis.
getting back to Josh's point, are the mobility fees by law able to pay for all of these improvements? I know we kind of went to mobility fees to allow transit and trails, but those were basically for capacity improvements, not safety improvements. And so that is what one thing I want to have you do. Mobility fees generate between $30 and $38 million a year. So you're talking about chewing up all your mobility fees an entire year's worth. There is a lot of money in the countywide ad valorem tax fund. Pro forma just said a $325 million surplus. So you may want to look there to Josh's point, doing this inside the city limits on county owned roads.
Okay, thank you all. Good discussion all the way around. We have been asked as an action item on the agenda to recommend approval to the TPO board of the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network Evaluation. Is there a motion?
I'll present one.
Sorry,
I'll present a motion, Chair.
all right, what is that motion, Mr. Bella?
Yep, motion to approve the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network evaluation for the purposes of public input, further evaluation and coordination with county roads within the city of Tampa limits.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Bella and a second from Christina Bosworth. Is there a discussion on the motion as stated by Mr. Bella, Mr. Trot?
Point of clarification, would the motion be able to pass because the study doesn't include Tampa specifically because it's for unincorporated Hillsborough County?
I mean, I'm sorry, what was, ask that question again?
The motion included Tampa, just, there was a lot to it, but it included Tampa, but this study has nothing to do with Tampa intentionally, so that motion cannot pass. Or wouldn't be valid. So that's why I'm just inquiring to see if that's the case.
Chair, I may address, there are two studies that were done. So in the motion, while I'm improving it, I'm also including a condition where they have to include that city study with this one. Because it seems like an issue the board has identified here as a network issue. So that's part of capturing that. And then part two of that, which really was part one, is I do believe the public needs to have a say to this. So that's why I'm asking this board to go with the motion that we need to let the public speak up about this. And the experts took a step back. We need to let the public talk about this so the county can get a better idea of what needs to be done.
All right, is there any more discussion on the motion?
I'm not going to be supporting the motion for some of the reasons that he stated that we're supposed to be voting on something that was done. And now we're trying to change the parameters of what was done.
Any other discussion on the motion? Aya?
I agree with all the members who voiced their concerns. I think that this study is not ready for a motion yet, because there are some holes or some concerns such as the equity data source. Another one will be the public involvement, as everyone says, and in coordination with the city of Tampa. Including and also harmonizing with existing or already programmed projects. But most importantly, I think that I'm not sure, and I'm not very confident in the land use, the activity generator metric that is being used on this study. I'm not sure when this data was pulled from. The land use data that is potentially being used is not up to date based on the development that's happening right now. So this data of land use or trip generation or the activity generator metric might be based on land use that was in 2019. While we might have development that happened that is just got permitted or approved last month that will change the exposure factors score greatly. So I think that we're not ready for this motion at all again.
All right, I appreciate that, and with respect, whether we're ready for it or not, we have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. Is there any more discussion on the motion that is currently before us? I see no other hands, no other lips moving at all in the room. Is there any discussion virtually?
Still no answer.
Okay, Chris, this is what happens when you make motions in the room. You get to repeat them. So if you would please repeat your motion as clearly and slowly as you possibly can for the benefit of the secretary and the rest of us.
Sure thing. So I'm presenting a motion to approve the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network evaluation for the purposes of public input to seek further evaluation and to be coordinated with county roads, to be coordinated with bicycle and pedestrian improvements on county roads within the city of Tampa limits.
Okay. Thank you. As the discussion is closed, I'm going to ask the secretary, please, to call the roll of this motion.
Rick Fernandez,
No.
Bill Roberts,
Oh,
Jim Davison,
No,
Carolyn Brown,
No.
Sherry Southwell, Aya Yassin,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
No.
John Skelton,
No.
Ed Majewski,
No.
Terrence Trot,
Yes.
Josh Frank,
No.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Chris Vella, Sarah Thomas,
No.
Kurt Waremeyer. I do see him online. Kurt, are you able to or Kit, are you able to unmute? Chris Gonzalez.
Yes.
The motion fails 11-4.
Chris, thank you for the effort. Well thought out, and I understand where you're coming from. Welcome to the CAC. Right, we still have the request from staff on the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network evaluation to approve, recommend to the TPO board. Is there another motion to be made?
Make motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
And Terrence Trot made the original motion, and I think Stephen Hollenkamp beat everybody to the second. Yeah. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the recommended approval to the TPO board? Mr. Roberts.
Sure, I'd just like to ask you if this motion is to simply approve the report and the recommendation as presented as opposed to the prior motion. Is that your understanding?
This is exactly right. Yes, the prior motion was to take.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Could you explain why we have to even have a vote on this? What is the TPO going to do with this study? Stick it in the long range transportation plan?
It's an action item, and that's what we're here to do, is to review and take action on action items.
Even though there's no relationship to the action item anyway?
Well, it's going to go to the board in 2 months, and at that point, they will have our recommendation.
If I may, so the value of this, just to clarify, this is a study that produces a methodology to evaluate bike facilities in the county, unincorporated county. There will be a supplementary study that will evaluate facilities right in the city. So those two will go together. Once the methodology is defined, that gives Hillsborough County the ability to use this methodology to prioritize facility improvements based on what you see. You understand, we're working with planners and engineers who will take into account the impacts of both studies, right? So I don't think that we should be suspicious and assume that because this methodology has flaws that it should be thrown out, right? They understand that there is some value to it. And even if there weren't a study on county facilities running through the city, they could also use that methodology to evaluate, just it won't be documented into bike prioritization. I hope that makes sense, Chris. Is that kind of sweet theory?
Yeah, I just want to be holistic, so.
Yeah.
All right, again, we have a motion to approve and make a recommendation to the TPO board, made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Josh Frank.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what Johnny just said. It sort of answers your question, Jim. In our approval of this as recommended, we are approving the methodology, which I think there's been a lot of discussion about the flaws within that methodology. Johnny's more optimistic. I am less optimistic. I am afraid that by this board sending its approval without any additional verbiage or text or comment, just as presented, then the discussion we've had here and the clear flaws I think we all see aren't going to get translated to the board, except for through comment as you presented as chair. So I think if anything, we should think very carefully about how we need to phrase the motion that has been made. So I have to think about if I'm going to make a an amendment. But
Ed Majewski,
Could you put back up the formula that was used, because it seems to me that formula is the crux of the methodology, and we've not paid any attention to that formula.
The formula, it comes from this, but there is a normalization factor because the first risk score has 25 and the other two have 20 is the reason for the normalization factor there.
Okay, just lead me through the formula and what it says.
I have our consultant, Chris Keller, on the phone. I'd like to ask him to do that. Chris, if you're available.
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself and it didn't seem to work. Yeah, and Wade talked about the normalization factor in there, and that was really to just balance the three categories. So it's a sum of the risk, exposure, and network scores balanced so that they're all kind of equal to 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And then through kind of conversations with county staff, there was a desire to put a slight weighting onto the network factors in there, and that's what's represented in that equation that you see on the slide.
Okay, I mean, I'm just puzzled where 0.04 times 0.09 comes from. It's 0.05, 0.5 times 0.9, and 0.5 times 1.2.
So the 0.04 is to balance the score. So the sum of the risk factors equal 25, as Wade mentioned. The exposure network ones are 20. So that's just to create a kind of balance. So the potential total sum is balanced in each one. And then of that, kind of the weight factor would be, a total of 3 with, a 0.9 for the exposure, the 1.2 factor onto the network, the balanced network score to give that a slight a positive weight on that one. So that 0.2 came from the 0.2 from both the other groups.
okay, any other questions in the room? Because I am absolutely lost. I'm not doing trigonometry.
No idea what it
I have no idea what he just said, or statistics or anything else. Chris?
Just look at the report, guys. There's actual deaths and accidents, like real numbers that are listed. I've been on Mars, since the 80s, I've walked it, crossed it. It's horrible. And a lot of the community there has been neglected. There's elderly facilities there. So my point is that you can change this metric in a separate agenda item or a separate process. We're sitting here trying to change this process as part of a project. And when I'm looking at it globally is that, one, there has been like 0 public input in this. And then 2, people are actually dying because we want to get a formula perfect. And so I feel like we should move forward for the sake of getting that public input and doing better coordination and use that time to talk to the TPO to address the issue of the equation here. So then we can force the big sea change, if you will, for future pedestrian and bicycle projects. That is where I'm coming with my motion previously. Now, to blindly approve this is flawed, but at the same time, you guys got to realize people's lives are at risk. So we have to move forward. I think we need to get that public input. So that's my point.
Any other, Terrence Trot?
Would just like to support the motion by saying that somehow it picked 2 areas that really needed, at least I can probably needed the other 2 as well, probably fit in the, need work category, but the methodology that they used, we had an attestation about waters, and I can give you my attestation about Bomb Riverview. So whether it's perfect or not, it nailed it.
Jim Davison?
Yeah, I can't support the motion. The formula is flawed. There's no public input. These things, after we pass them, take on a life of their own, and we never see them again. And people dying, there's people dying in all types of matters. I've taken care of more people in this room that have been hit by bikes. I can tell you, it's not fun. But that's not the reason that you have to go down and support this bill. You have to have it done right with public input. Otherwise, we're gonna be wasting the scarce dollars that we have. We don't have all the money in the world, so we can't be voting like we do.
Okay. We have a motion before us made by Mr. Trot, seconded by Mr. Hollenkamp to recommend approval to the TPO board of the Hillsborough County Bicycle Network Evaluation. I'm going to ask the secretary, please, to call the roll.
Rick Fernandez,
No.
Bill Roberts,
No.
Jim Davison,
No,
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Sherry Southwell. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
No.
Thank you. Aya Yessen,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Don Skelton,
No.
Ed Mrzewski,
No.
Terrence Trot,
Yes.
Joshua Frank,
No.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Chris Vella. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Sarah Thomas,
Yes.
Kit Waremeyer, Chris Gonzalez.
Yes.
Motion fails 8-7.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Wade. Appreciate it. Good effort.
Chair,
Yeah.
may I just, may I, say a motion or try to run another motion?
Not right now. We have an action item pending for us. We have a new motion on new issue that you want to raise. We can do that in new business after we take care of the TP, or the tip. Right. Next action item. Transportation Improvement Program update. Item 7B. Nay, I will come back to you, all right, unfinished business or new business. Johnny, you're the man of the hour here.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah, so I promised last time to be brief, but I assume that most of us are here to listen to the tips, so I'll be as concise as I think I need to be, because we have some new folks in the room. I'll actually spend a little bit more time than I prepared to explain the tip. So Johnny Wong, TPO staff, and I'm here to present you with the update to the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 24 to 28.
Ronnie, can you just speak up a little bit, because, or maybe in the microphone, if
Sure.
you're comfortable with that.
Say closer.
Of course.
I'm here across the room and, I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, not that close though.
All right, yeah, I got it. So anyway, I'm here to brief you on the update to the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 24 through 28. I'll begin like I always do and always have, presenting you some background information that I feel is necessary to better understand the tip and the value of it. I like to contrast the tip with another one of the TPO's critical planning documents, because I think that that's the best way to understand it. So to begin with, the 25-year long-range transportation plan. By design, that plan is broad and visionary. It doesn't identify specific projects or a number of local goals that we have established, because over a 25-year time horizon, it's really difficult to anticipate the specific needs that we will have. We don't know in the year 2040 exactly which roads will have a crash problem. We can take an educated guess, but you understand the difficulty of forecasting the specifics that far out into the future. Contrast that to the TIP, which is a 5-year work program that identifies specific projects that we believe will move the needle and help us achieve some of our goals. The details of these projects are intentionally very specific and accurate because they're seeking funds for specific phases of a project. In the TIP, you'll see project limits, phases seeking funds, specific numbers about how much money is needed and in which year they're going to expend these funds and for what purpose. The TIP is a federally required document and it's subject to many federal and state requirements. So prior to adoption, we go through a very long checklist to ensure that it's compliant with all of the rules that apply. Beginning at the top of the list, the TIP has to be consistent with that long-range transportation plan. So some of our goals that we've established in the LRTP are safety, enhancing mobility, maintaining our infrastructure that already exists, connecting people to jobs, and taking care of transportation disadvantaged populations to ensure that they're also mobile. So the TIP projects have to be consistent with those goals in the LRTP. It has to be developed in coordination with our partners at FDOT and HART, specifically for their revenue forecasts. The TIP isn't a wish list, so we can't have a ton of projects identified in there that don't have a reasonable shot of getting funded within 5 years. And FDOT and HART help us identify feasible revenue sources. It has to include regionally significant projects. Has to include any highway or transit project that's going to be funded with money from Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration. Again, it's not a wish list, so it has to be cost feasible. The costs and the revenues have to balance out. It has to be developed in consultation with the public, and we have to publish criteria that we use for prioritizing projects, specifically quantitative criteria that can be tracked and hold us accountable. The structure of the TIP is that, well, I like to say you can break it down into 3 lists, each serving a specific purpose, and I'll kind of describe that as we move through the next few slides. Table 1 is a list of projects that have been designated as priorities, so we've already evaluated them. We believe that they move the needle. They have received some construction funding over the next 5 years, so construction is either imminent or will happen before fiscal year 29 begins. Projects that have construction dollars remain on table 1 until they're complete. Number 1, for planning consistency to make sure that it's consistent with the CIPs of our local government partners, but also to demonstrate that they still have the support of public. Because construction may not all be funded at one time and local governments may have to go out and find additional construction dollars, having these remain on table 1 really helps them do that. Table 2 is probably what we're interested in tonight. It's the most important list, I believe. It's often called the priority list or list of priority projects. If a project is listed on table 2, it means that we've evaluated it and we concur that once complete, it will have a positive impact on one of our transportation goals that I already mentioned. Based on the results of our analysis, we rank that project and that kind of puts it in pole position to receive money to deliver a certain phase of that project so that it can be completed. Projects that are on table 2 are still seeking construction funding and they remain on the TIP until that happens. Once that money is programmed, they'll then graduate to table 1. And table 3 is the longest of the 3. It's a very long list of projects that have funding programmed sometime within the next 5 years. It includes everything that's identified in the FDOT work program. We don't have to do this, but we do include projects in our local government's capital improvement programs. We also include planning studies and projects that defy easy categorization. So they may not help us achieve infrastructure maintenance or safety or mobility, but they're still valuable, right? I like to give the example that some of the miscellaneous projects you'll see in here could be herbicide, pesticide applications, engineering projects may also fall in there. Like I said, the local government projects don't have to be included in the TIP, but we do that to help ensure coordination, planning consistency, as well as transparency. Taking a step back to table 2 for just a moment. Because this is the heaviest lift of the TIP update every year, I'll explain what goes into making that priority ranked list. Early each year, typically in the final days of January or early February, TPO staff has a meeting with our local government partners and we review their existing priorities. So we'll go through the list of table 2 and ask them, is this still a priority for your community? Do you want it to remain eligible to receive funding? If they say yes, it remains on the priority list. If they say no, or if they say that it's already been funded using local dollars, then we can remove it. During that same meeting, the local governments often propose new priority projects. And so they'll submit us a list of projects that they're requesting to add to the list. We will categorize them into one of these 5 programs that are shown with icons at the bottom of the screen. Red is infrastructure maintenance, orange, Vision Zero, safety projects, purple, typically intersection improvements or things that can help smooth traffic flow, alleviate congestion. The blue is mobility options, so you'll see a lot of trails, side paths, maybe transportation disadvantaged services, maybe transit operations. And in the green are major projects. The major projects are often high dollar projects that can't easily be funded with TPO funds, as well as capacity projects. So highway widenings, extensions, mass transit would also end up there. Based on the categorization, we'll then go out and seek the best data to evaluate the impacts of these projects. And once we have that evaluation, we'll rank the projects among other comparable projects and yield a priority list ranked from number 1 to, I believe, high 80s now. Once we have table 2, that's actually very early stage in the game because the TPO staff work with our local government partners year round to try to find revenue sources to fund these projects and deliver them. And as I mentioned to you all before, this can be a very complicated process because there are a ton of different grant opportunities out there. Each may have their own requirements because they're coming from different agencies. They may have their own timelines and schedules. They may want to fund some portion of a project, but not the whole thing. So it can get very complicated, but we often take the lead to help identify grant sources, and oftentimes we will take the lead in applying for those. So now we can get into the highlights from the updated tables, specifically tables 1 and 2. Beginning with table 1. This year we added construction, we programmed construction for a number of projects that were previously on table 2, and you all have been a part of that. You may recognize a lot of these projects that were programmed with funds from TIP amendments that you all saw. So beginning with the state of repair and resilience, that infrastructure maintenance category, T-bar to van pool operations, bus stop capital repairs, that was the subject of a TIP amendment a couple months ago, hard heavy maintenance facility. Moving on to safety projects, Boy Scout at Manhattan, that traffic signalization and intersection project. A couple sidewalks around middle schools out in Plant City, namely Marshall Middle and Tomlin. A safety project on the corridor on Lois Ave, Cleveland, the Boy Scout. Several intersection projects along US 301 at Harding, Stacy, McIntosh, and Palm River Roads. And then finally, safety project on Fowler Ave from 56 to I-75. Moving into the mobility category, real choices when not driving, we got funding for Green Artery segments D and E. An intersection project on Mango Road at Old Hillsborough Ave. And filling in some sidewalk gaps on state roads located around the county. Some major projects were funded this year. The West Shore Interchange final phase has some money programmed to complete that project. Big Bend Road East won a transportation regional incentive program grant, so they're able to complete 1/2 of those bookends. The eastern portion is from Simmons Loop Road to US 301. And the hard heavy maintenance facility, again, that's like a very high dollar project, high price tag, and we were able to fund a portion of that. So because that construction is now programmed, we're adding it to table 1. At the same time, we completed some projects that were listed on table 1. So the ones that have been removed are safety project at the intersection of Bush Boulevard and Armenia. Some Hillsborough County safe routes to school projects were funded and constructed and completed. Morris Bridge bike lane project, safety project on Kennedy Boulevard from West Shore to Woodland Ave. A project on the Upper Tampa Bay Trail Connector near Lutz Lake Fern Road got a sidewalk gap filled in. The Selman Greenway Trailhead project from 17th to 19th Street was removed at the request of VIA. That project had kind of been languishing on table one for a while, so we reached out to them to ask if construction was completed, and they said no. When they were working on designing that, they ran into some issues that couldn't be resolved. It basically needs to start at square one. A feasibility study will probably be needed, so we're gonna remove that, and next year work with VIA to get that added back on the table two as a priority. And lastly, a widening project out in Plant City, Sam Allen Road from State Road 39 to Park Road was completed. The updates to table two. We added a number of priorities. The ones that you see on this slide, I would categorize as more ongoing routine needs because these continue to reappear on the tip year after year. It's an ongoing need for HART to replace its buses. They're focusing mostly on replacing diesel with low emission buses. They're also requesting some money to do midlife overhauls of drivetrain components, so replacing engines and transmissions to extend the life of some of these vehicles so that they don't need to get replaced quite as often. HART's requesting $17 million for this project, and we're recommending to the TPO board that they fund $5 million of that for fiscal year 29. The replacement of the HART heavy maintenance facility, again, is a recurring request. HART is asking for $5 million. We're not going to be recommending that amount this year because there's an FTA grant that has yet to be decided. If HART receives that grant, they won't need our money. So we're going to wait to see the results of that. And if they don't get it, we'll recommend funding the maintenance facility the following year. HART is also requesting that we continue funding bus stop repairs to make them ADA compliant. They requested $2 million for that, and we're going to recommend that the board fund that amount. Lastly, a request from City of Tampa to reconstruct Bermuda Boulevard seawall from 22nd Street north to Lindsay Street. That was a request to add it to the priority list to be considered in future years, but no funding was requested for that just yet. Moving on to the safety projects, there was a request in Plant City for $1 million to design a complete street segment on Collins Street from Alsobrook to Alexander. A request from the City of Tampa for $2 million to install pedestrian crossings, curb extensions, intersection improvements, and some bike and ped improvements on McDill Ave. That project's going to run from Kennedy Boulevard all the way to Columbus Drive. We're going to recommend funding that request of $2 million. There were two more requested from the City of Tampa. One is to right-size Platt Street from Armenia to Parker and allow the installation of a protected bike lane, as well as doing some other intersection improvements. There was a similar project on South 22nd Street from US 41 to Marconi. Again, these were requests just to add them to the priority list, but there was no funding asked by the city. And last is a $500,000 request for a planning study on State Road 39 from Alexander Street to Trapnell. We're going to recommend funding a portion of that study up to $200,000. Next up is smart cities. Again, remember, these are intersection improvements that can improve traffic flow through intersections, as well as congestion and reliability projects.
Johnny, I'm sorry, I know you're in a groove here, but maybe you're not able to do this on the fly, but if not tonight, for future reference in future CACs, if you're going to make reference to specific items in a PowerPoint like this, it might be nice if you gave us a line item on the tip that we could refer to actually in the document. Okay, got to look at it because I'm trying to follow along with you in the document. And it's a lost cause for me right now.
All right, I got you. Thanks for that. So some of the projects that are listed on this slide are at the very top of the smart cities project category. I believe for city traffic replacements, it's the #1 project in that category. City of Tampa is asking to replace traffic signals. Some are twice past their useful lifespan. They're also requesting that we add a signal, that we give them funds to add a signal at Franklin Street and Water Street. We will be working with the City of Tampa on submitting or preparing and then submitting a grant application. There's a federal discretionary grant for congestion relief that we think, for which we think these projects would be an eligible expenditure. So we're not recommending funding through the TIP mechanism, but we are going to work with them to submit a grant. Third on this slide, Hillsborough County is looking to construct a smart traffic network that would amount to a pretty significant build out of its traffic monitoring system. That request is for $45 million. Again, that's a very big ticket item, but it can be segmented. So rather than putting it into major projects, we're leaving it in smart cities. That's another candidate that we're going to look at to fund with that discretionary grant that I just mentioned. So speaking of that grant, the congestion relief program, the federal government is releasing $50 million per year for the next 4 years to fund eligible projects. We are looking forward to the notice of funding announcement. We've been told that they're looking for project packages of no less than $10 million, of which we think we could make a pretty big dent in the E4 city traffic signal replacements in that county smart traffic network. Last two on this slide, Temple Terrace is requesting $100,000 each to do traffic signal warrant studies along 56th Street at two locations. One is at Grove Hill Road and another is at Druid Hills Road. FDOT last year completed a corridor study on 56th Street, which covered both of these intersections. And it's my understanding that DOT is reaching out to the city to ask which improvements from that study they would like to move forward. So rather than us recommending that the TPO fund these traffic signal warrant studies, we're actually going to wait for FDOT and Temple Terrace to identify some improvements and then look at funding those material improvements in future years rather than just a study. Next up is Real Choices When Not Driving. Plant City submitted a request for $1.75 million to design and construct the southernmost segment of the Plant City Canal Connector Trail. That trail would connect neighborhoods to the downtown area. We're going to recommend funding the entire amount of that phase. Next up on this slide, there were 3 requests from the city of Tampa, one for bike and ped safety improvements and trail connections on South 26th Street from US 41 to Animal Drive. The next 2 are filling in sidewalk gaps. One's on Yukon Street from 22nd to 40th, and followed by Rome Ave from MLK Boulevard to Sly Ave. None of those three have funding requests, so we'll wait to see what information comes next year. Last on this slide, Hillsborough County submitted a $3.4 million request to construct segment 6 of the Bypass Canal Trail. That segment runs from Fletcher to Bruce Pinellas Boulevard. That project will not only appear in the TIP, but also on the regional multi-use trail priority list. We think that that's a really good candidate project to fund with SunTrail dollars. That's a state program, and they just increased the amount of funding available. So next year would be a really ideal time to submit applications to try to get some of that money. Last, for table 2 are the major projects. These are big ticket items that can connect people to jobs. City of Tampa submitted an $8 million request for operations funding to dedicate to the Tico streetcar. With that money, they will increase frequency from 15-minute headways to 10. And they're also seeking to extend that line north from downtown Tampa up to the Heights. There was a $14 million request for trip funding from Hillsborough County to put toward Big Bend Road West. I mentioned to you earlier that the eastern side of that already received the same grant source. With that amount, they're going to be able to complete it, but they don't have enough to do both. So this project will appear in the TIP, will also appear in that regional priority list to make it eligible for trip funding. If they receive that, it will complete the western bookend, and that project again is to widen it from 4 to 6 lanes. There was another request from Hillsborough County, $85 million to fund a portion of construction costs for Lithia Pinecrest widening project. This project would be on Lithia from Fishhawk Boulevard to Lumsden. Widening it from 2 to 4 lanes and also doing some other corridor enhancements. That is a lot of money to ask from the TPO, multiple times what we have in our discretionary budget each year. So we're taking the lead and working with Hillsborough County right now to identify some interim improvements rather than a widening that we think can help alleviate traffic congestion there. So we definitely agree that there is a problem, but we're not entirely sure that a widening is the best path forward. That would be another project that could be eligible for congestion relief. Again, that's $50 million a year that's going to be made available. We think that this could be a good candidate. There are also some other funding opportunities like mega projects funded with that federal discretionary grant have to be over $100 million. And we think that this could be a really good candidate to receive that. Fourth on this slide, there was a $62 million request to fund a portion of right-of-way and construction costs to widen Van Dyke Road from the Suncoast Parkway to Worley. That is currently 2 lanes, and this project would widen it out to 4. And last up, Temple Terrace is requesting $200,000 to complete a feasibility study for a new bridge over the bypass canal near 122nd Avenue. Table 3, as I mentioned earlier, is the longest of the 3 lists, too large to discuss in any significant detail. So we've abbreviated that conversation and produced a summary chart to demonstrate how money is allocated in the FDOT work program. On this slide, you can see that 5 years of funding is programmed among projects falling into each of our investment categories. No surprise, especially given that the final phase of the West Shore interchange is funded. The lion's share of the funds are allocated to major projects, more than $2.8 billion in 57% of the total. Follow that up with maintenance projects totaling roughly $960 million. 15% of the funds are allocated to miscellaneous projects, 6% to mobility projects like trails, sidewalks, side paths, 3% in safety, and 1% in congestion management projects. I know that that might strike you all, but keep in mind that a lot of the major projects may also include safety, mobility, and congestion treatments, but because they're bundled together in a total construction estimate, it's almost impossible to break out those totals separately. The last section of my presentation, wrapping up, there's a number of steps that we still have to take before Wednesday's public hearing and then adoption and transmission to our transmittal to FDOT. TPO staff have reviewed the list of priority projects, and we've recommended those funding amounts for eligible projects that we just discussed and is shown in table 2. To answer a common question about when these projects will get built, with the recommendations to the TPO board this year about which projects to fund, we're actually asking them to program money for fiscal year 29. So whatever recommendations we offer this year, with very few exceptions, that money will be allocated 5 years out to the future. That kind of speaks to the strategy that the local governments use in adding projects to this list. If it's too urgent, something that needs to be corrected sooner than 5 years out, they'll often use local funds or go after discretionary grants. Most of the projects that they submitted, there's like a 5-year window of time where there will be no improvements until some money gets made available. There's also some regional coordination that has happened and some that still needs to happen. A lot of the projects that, 2 of the notable projects that I mentioned will be identified in the Hillsborough TIP priority list. And they're also going to be considered by the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance to be included in those regional priority lists. One of those grant sources, those regional grant sources that I already mentioned, the TRIP, that's roughly $15 million a year. That's a really good source of funds for projects that generate economic growth and can't be paid for with TPO discretionary funds. We're going to be advocating that our board support adding Big Bend West to that list. Since Big Bend East won money last year, if the West gets it this year, that'll complete the project, which makes it look really good. There are also going to be 2 regional trails added to the regional multi-use trail priority list. Bypass Canal Trail segments 5 and 6, put together, they run from Hardy Road to Pursuit Downs Boulevard. And we don't have any new additions to the major projects category this year. We've already achieved most of our milestones leading up to the public hearing and adoption. We published the draft tip to the website for public review 30 days ago, almost exactly. We're still receiving comments. We're going to transmit all those comments to the board ahead of next Wednesday. We have made these presentations to all committees tonight. We'll be wrapping it up. We're hoping to get feedback from you all as soon as I stop talking. We published ads in the Tampa Bay Times, La Gaceta, Florida Sentinel Bulletin newspapers. We also posted signs, mailed flyers to all addresses that are within areas that have new priorities added to the list and any funded priorities or any funded projects that have right-of-way impacts. So if you got a letter in the mail from us, that means that you're living near a funded project. The presentation schedule is just as shown on the slide. We got unanimous approval from 3 of the 4 committees, and we're soliciting your feedback right now. Next Wednesday, as the chair mentioned, the public hearing is going to be on the 2nd floor in this building, beginning at 6 p.m. If you want to register for comments, I believe the sign up opens at 4:30. Correct.
Sign up to speak.
Sign up to speak.
Usually it opens up the day before or days before. They close out.
Close out.
Within a half hour to an hour of the meeting start. And written comments have to be submitted by the day before, as I recall.
You can also appear in person. It's going to be hybrid again. So there will be virtual participation opportunities. And that wraps it up for me. The recommended action for you all today is to approve the tip update and approve the tip priority list. And I'm happy to answer any questions and listen to the conversation.
Okay, well, for those of you who have just gone through that for the first time, my condolences. I'm sure you're all ready for the quiz. It'll come later in the evening. I have a couple of questions before I throw this out, or concerns, I suppose. Simply making an observation from previous years. Clearly, we're being asked to focus on table 2 of the tip, which contains 3 tables. I don't recall that necessarily being the way we've approached this in the past. Because I certainly recall making comments and even making motions about items that were in table 1 and table 2 in the past. That said, I have no problem with focusing on table 2, but I do have a problem with being asked to approve the tip, which is inclusive of table 1, 2, and 3. We maybe haven't been given as clear an opportunity to review all 3 of those tables as we have in the past. And the recommended action here is, well, we're being asked to approve the entire tip. So that's all 3 of the tables. I wouldn't do that because I don't feel sufficiently well informed as to tables 1 and 2 or 1 and 3.
Yeah.
I am prepared to take action on table 2. That's my personal observation and concern. Others may or may not share it. But I see that as a problem procedurally in the way we've approached this year. So I'll shut up now. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Wong? Okay, we'll strip things up. We'll start on the right side of the room and closer into me. Josh Frank.
Okay, great. Couple quick questions, Johnny. One is, to your knowledge, are any of the new items on table 2, once approved, past the point of no return?
Yeah, there are a number of projects on table 2 that would fund design and construction.
Can you recap that for new folks with what I mean by saying that?
Yeah, so this is colloquial usage by now. It's not defined, but for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been referring to projects that once approved will have funding for design. as past the point of no return. And what that means is any project that has design allocated in fiscal year 25 or sooner than that can no longer be removed from the tip by unilateral action from the TPO board. If there's a project that has design funded 25 or before, once this tip is adopted, it has to be a joint decision by the TPO board and FDOT. And I'll just
Expressway Authority.
I will get this out of the way now because I'm sure that the question will come. The term preliminary design, early stage of preliminary design appears in state statute, but it's not defined. It's kind of a term of art in the planning profession and engineering. There has been no case law to challenge what that definition actually means. And our attorney has weighed in, given his opinion several times. What I will offer is that if the TPO board did wish to remove a project that did have design funded sooner than fiscal year 25, FDOT has told us that it's never too late, that it's part of the continuous collaborative and cooperative planning process, that if the TPO wanted to change or remove something, that they would work with the board. I hope that's.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, and the last time we reviewed the tip. That's something I think this board has wanted to see expressed in the tip. Whether it's an asterisk somewhere or a different color or something that basically says, to shorten what Johnny just explained, that if we vote for it and it's approved, it cannot be removed unless the agency agrees. So even the county commission can't take the plugs off. So that's happened in the past where there's been votes to remove it and say, the agency has disagreed, and so the items can't come off. It's rare, I think, but it's also fair to assume that, we need to know that type of information. So that was my first question. There are things on here that are past when no return once approved.
Yes.
Okay. I'm leery on approving this for the same reasons Rick mentioned, but also because I don't know which ones those are. So I don't know if that's something that can be.
Yeah, well, while we talk, I did publish an appendix in the tip that's posted to the website. So if you scroll down to the appendix and it's listed, it's identified as appendix letter, whatever, projects with preliminary engineering funded prior to fiscal year 25. So we put together a list of the projects in there for you. Regarding the projects that I just mentioned, yeah, a number of them are funded for design and construction. If you, a number of projects in table 3 are funded for design and construction. And if the projects in table 2 are approved, they would be past the point of no return. If you have specific projects in mind, I can look that up for you right now.
Okay.
But all that info should be available.
Okay, I'll see if I can find it before we go. The second question is, as has also happened in years past, we get a June surprise where between today's reading by the CAC and the TPO board meeting of the tip, things get added, which is always concerning.
Yeah.
Is there anything coming that we should be prepared to see added to this list in the next week?
Yeah, I'm not a fortune teller. However, there have been no rumblings behind the scenes about projects that we added. I will say that there is one conversation that we're having with FDOT right now about which projects would be eligible for a specific funding type. So in Real Choices, we're not driving category, at the very bottom of that category in table 2, it's priority number 70, filling sidewalk gaps. That's a new source of federal funds to eligible projects would be any that can reasonably achieve carbon reductions. So in our minds, we're thinking projects that improve reliability, reduce congestion. It could be sidewalk trail projects, transit projects. FDOT right now is seeking to use that money to fill sidewalk gaps. Well, we also think that there are a number of other eligible projects higher on the priority list that should be funded with that money. And that's the only one, but if a decision is made ahead of Wednesday, I will mention it specifically at the public hearing.
Is we've talked about this before, specifically, I talked about this before. Is it possible that between when the CAC sees this list and when the full board sees this list, that there is some sort of moratorium on accepting TIP amendments?
The board
Can you ignore your email for a week?
The board didn't take action to implement a moratorium, but I think that this falls within my domain. So I'll say as TIP program manager and CAC liaison, if there's a request, I'm just not gonna honor it because we closed our internal deadlines at new projects back in March. And this is way too late in the game. I don't think that I or my team would be willing to re-rank projects, add them to the list and renumber, because we'd also have to go through all of the funding recommendations and try to balance those out. And it's just way too late in the game this year.
Okay, good. I'm happy with that answer. That hasn't been the case in years past. Things have been added last minute. And after we've seen it. Okay, last question. I promise it'll be short. There are now 3 items on this list for the streetcar expansion and modernization. The Federal Transit Agency or Federal Transit Authority won the modern streetcar park request, and now the O&M from the city. Does the HART request and the city's O&M request, that's $58 million combined in their ask. Is that 58 out of the 67 that's required for local funding? Or is that considered something different? I'm trying to guess or figure out if the local funding portion that's still listed in the FTA one is almost all the way there or is still mostly unfunded.
I'm gonna have to say that I don't have the answer to that. I saw that Jesus from Art logged in earlier. If he's still on and knows the answer, I'd like to direct you to him. I'm really not sure.
Okay, because the 100 million from FTA is done, the 67 from the state New Start grant is done and approved. We're really just waiting on finding the local match, which it seems like there's a request now for 58 or so $1 billion on here. I'm wondering how much of that is left to be filled.
Yeah, based on the size of that ask, I can guess, but I don't want to tell you wrong, so I'm gonna point to Jesus if he's not available. I'll have to get your answer after this meeting's over. Okay,
Thank you.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. Does this say Seuss?
Yeah, that's me. Hey, I'm Jesus with HART Planning and Scheduling. I'll preamble my response by saying what Johnny said. Don't quote me on this because there is a lot of much smarter people working on the streetcar extension project. However, it is my understanding that TIP funds are partially or mostly federal, and you can't match federal with federal. So I would guess that the 58 is part of the 67. So it's not new money. It's like just keeping track of that old money that's already been asked for. As for the status of the local match, I wouldn't be able to provide an update. I think the latest and greatest information on the streetcar extension is that the city of Tampa is pushing or working on a PD&E for the streetcar extension, and they're gonna choose a locally preferred alternative. They're looking at rubber tired options, but that's all very preliminary. So, and last I asked, there is no specific timeline, but I could ask specific people in the city to see if they have more information.
Okay.
He's right.
Okay, working down the right side of the room here, I see another hand, Christina Bosworth.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Johnny, I did print table 1, and my question, I have 2 questions. The first one is on table 1. How firm are these dates? Because there's the Big Bend interchange, which is 4245133, is scheduled for completion in summer of 2025. However, when you look at 448985, the Big Bend widening from 4 to 6 lanes from Simmons Loop, which is right there where that interchange improvement is being done, to 301 is gonna be widened from 4 to 6 lanes, starting in fiscal year 24. So we're saying for like an entire year, that stretch is gonna be.
Yeah.
Torn up. I mean, did they look at that about what it's gonna do? I mean, I took Big Bend, I do it all the time, to pay today that way, and it took me an hour, not hours, it took me 20 minutes to go 1 mile. In the afternoon, and there's no traffic. When this is underway along with the construction on the interchange, it's gonna be horrible. Horrible. I don't like the dates. I think those dates should be reviewed. I don't know if funding is contingent on starting this fiscal year 24, but if it's not, it would be nice to push that out.
Yeah, you're right. And that's very astute of you to notice that. I would say that the scheduling for the time estimates for when construction begins and is completed, that's the most tentative aspect of the tip. We really rely on our partners, and because most of the planners we work with aren't involved in construction management, they're kind of getting communication through a telephone line. And we don't have any way to verify whether or not the estimates that they've given us are correct. Yeah, the dates for when construction is going to be complete, at the least.
Okay, those dates are horrible. I certainly hope that does not happen. And then my other one, it has to do with table 2, number 21, vision 0. It's on page 43. And it has to do with Sims Road at US 301. They're asking for $400,000 for a PP&E study. Sims Road at US 301. Need to understand how that is impacted by Big Bend and Gibson. There's projects on Big Bend to relieve the congestion. There's 2 projects in here for Gibson to relieve the congestion. Sims Road is the cut through road for people to avoid those 2 to get on 75. So I don't know that this $400,000 is necessary to look at that until these other 2 projects are complete.
Yeah.
That's, I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There's a couple of reasons why we're not going to recommend funding that PD&E study now. Number one, there are plenty of PD&Es that need to be completed, which will then turn into construction projects. And the county probably doesn't need to add another study, just make it sit on the shelf, because once completed, once you get that approval, the clock starts ticking on when you need to deliver that project. County also didn't submit an application for it just yet, which conveys to me that it's not as high of a priority as some other projects. And you're right, the conditions down there are changing. I mean, Big Bend, the interchange projects, the Wogans, there's talk about projects all over that part of the county. So the feasibility or planning study that would have led to the PD&E, the assumptions might have to be revised.
Right, and there was one other one I had on here, sorry, one more that's important, I think, and that is under table 2, smart cities number 40, and that's intersection improvements at US 301 in Balm. This really, I hope this is funded, because this really needs to be done. And not only that, but I know Balm widening is on here as well, and that's critical. I don't know if everybody's aware, there's a school on there. There's a school there, there's no sidewalks. There's new construction going on. 2 of the corners there, it's just an accident waiting for a child to be hit. It's very bad. Children cross that all the time. There's no sidewalks. The interchange, I've almost been hit twice. Once I went down on my bike at that interchange. Yeah, it's a very bad interchange. That definitely needs to be.
Yeah, we will be recommending to the TPO board that they fund the full amount of 400,000 requested for the PD&E. What I will say about this, any project that's sitting higher than 25 on the priority list, most of the time when we get that far down, long since run out of money. The TPO discretionary grants total, I would say, is typically between 20 and 25 million. And we made a commitment a couple of years back to fund construction ready safety projects. So if a project is seeking construction, those would rank very highly. Safety projects asking for design would rank slightly lower on the list. Because this is just a PPD, we're still gonna recommend funding because that's the very problematic corridor. But if the county were able to fund that study on their own and then later request design money, we would probably be able to deliver that. I think having it ranked number 41 on the list gives it a low probability of getting funded this year. But it's not impossible.
Okay, Christina, on down the row, Ed?
Can I just say, one thing on, Rick started with this comment about table one, and I guess I'm notwithstanding Christine's comments, which are very good comments, by the way. I guess my opinion is that if table one is committed to be under construction, you know, whether there are projects in there that we like or not, it's like water over the dam, so let's not spend our time on those. The other comment I'd make is that once we get to the point of no return, if that's when preliminary engineering begins, it is possible, certainly during preliminary engineering, that you identify things that you didn't know before that cause you to reevaluate the project. And as I understand it, the catch on that is that the MPO can't unilaterally make that decision, but certainly the MPO working quote cooperatively with DOT can revisit projects and, you know, mutually decide, yeah, this is, you know, there's subsurface conditions we didn't know about, and it just blows it up, and we've got to take this up. And I mean, it means we're not unilateral, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a voice.
That's it. And I'm sorry, was there a question or did you just?
No,
had a
just a
comment?
comment.
Okay, Chris, not forcing you now, but you have a question?
I don't, it's not gonna be that heavy. I have a quick question, Johnny. So we're talking about lithium pine press and looking at the handout you provided. I'm referring to as item 91. Is that correct?
So the numbering may be off depending on which version you saw on the webpage. Is correct. We've been scrambling to wrap this up. We've been making updates almost daily. We're gonna try to indicate the date that it was updated on the webpage. The version that I have reported on the table was just updated this afternoon.
Okay, that explains it because I noticed when once my PDF emailed to us, it was differential.
Yeah.
I kind of panicked because I'm like, well, what about all these other things I was looking at?
All right, so do we have a comment or question about item 90?
Well, my question here was to make sure that we're actually looking at the right version, because the version that was provided by staff to all of us is different than what's here.
Yeah, it's the project he's talking about is the widening on lithium pine press from Fishhawk to Langston.
That's item 91 on our tabletop version. Yes?
Yeah, just making sure. So make sure we'll get the right thing. And then item number 73, which is concurrent to both series here. Can you explain in detail what work is occurring there? And are these auxiliary and express lanes funded? Or is that item funding for those items specifically as a part of it? So 73 is a major project and believe it deals with section 4 and 5. But this is like, I believe, right after Winter Interchange, and virtually up to downtown door.
You got a question about the description? Like whether or not-
Yeah, so I just want to get clarification. Is that funding seeking? Is that funding any express lanes and auxiliary lanes of sections that is described? Because I know there's
what the
funding funds.
Yeah, what the funding will be used for is exactly as described here. This is like almost a verbatim transcript of what's found on the FDOT page describing the project. FDOT actually submitted this language to us. So because they're managing the project, I would trust that whatever is described is accurate representation on what that project is.
Okay, so in a case of, obviously, the way how this is read, there is funding for construction. However, it does go in the description of new express lane, so. If one were to question the express lane portion of this, one could say, do not fund any express lanes or auxiliary lanes, item number 7. That would, that would be relevant because it won't get in the way of already what's approved construction, right?
Yeah, you can always, you can make that comment or propose it as a motion. TPO board would consider it at next Wednesday's meeting, whether or not they would act on it, it's anybody's guess. But yeah, you're free to make that motion. Is that what you're looking for?
Well, yeah, I was just trying to get some clarification, that's all, just making sure I understand it. All right, that's it, that's all I got.
Okay, left side of the room. Mr. Holliday.
Thank you, Johnny. Great explanation, as always. You had said, I've heard before, I'm like, it was like Project 80 or something. That like someone was like, oh, that'll never get funded, it's too far down. And then you had just said, oh, anything beyond 25, like you won't be funded. Was that just for that category, that work category?
Once you start getting below project number, I'm just using 25. Kind of arbitrarily, but pretty close to that. By the time we get that far down on the priority list, typically the money that the TPO is guaranteed is already gone. So some of our sources of discretionary funding are surface transportation block grant, that's maybe 15 million here. Transportation alternatives, maybe 3 million here. TRIP is that funding source that's allocated to the districts and then sub-allocated to the MPOs. We have to actually split that money among Pinellas and Pasco. And there's some others, carbon reduction funds, there's some new ones that come online. But you know, you're looking at max 25 to 30 mil annually. And you'll see like most of the construction projects, the safety projects, they're asking for more than $1 million. So when we get to 25, that money is mostly exhausted. For the major projects, although it's not likely that the TPO funds those with our discretionary grants, for planning consistency to be awarded federal money, they still have to be in the TIP. So they'll fall into major. That doesn't mean that they've got no shot of getting funded, but no shot of getting funded with our small pot. We put them on here because there are big sources of money out there, like Mega, that project for that grant program where I told you has to be more than 100 million. There are a ton of infrastructure rail grant sources that are identified in the IIJ. RAISE is another good one. So we put those on the priority list because we want to convey to FHWA, FTA, whoever holds the money, that these are priorities and that we want these projects funded. Also, like I mentioned, you know, we're actively going after money right now to see what we can do about it here like this and the traffic network, signal replacements. So not likely that they'll get programmed with TPO funds, but we're still going to work with the partners to go get other money. That's what we're there.
So then if you're like a project and it's top of the list for real choices when not driving. It's number 48. It's not going to get funded with the TIP, but it's still good that it's at the top of the list because there's other funding sources and they look to the TIP to make decisions on what people want and what the county wants, what the cities want.
There's always a possibility, it might be a slim chance, but some of the projects that are categorized in Division 0, in order to be eligible for our funds, the local government has to submit an application. You'll see in a lot of these descriptions, we'll say SU application needed or TA application needed. They might be on the list, but they might not be eligible for funding because either we don't have the funding request or the local government did submit an application or they submitted an incomplete application or any number of reasons. So I like to tell people like 25 is usually the cutoff, but there are exceptions. We're recommending funding for the Plant City Canal Connector Trail. I think that that's a good one, and it's kind of on the cusp right now.
That was in the 50s and it was like 2 million or 1.75 million. So I thought, oh, no chance.
There were a lot of projects that ranked higher, but just weren't ready to go.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on the left side of the room here? Yeah,
Yes, I have a question about, you made a comment about the city of Temple Terrace projects. There was a project for a study. Was it 43, the one about 56 Grove Hill Road and Druid Hill?
Yes.
Yeah, so if this is only a study and you said that you possibly will not fund it, because, I mean, what was the reason that?
Yeah, so DOT wrapped up a corridor study on 56 50th all the way from, gosh, I can't remember, somewhere near the crosstown as far, let me go turn the lights on. Give me one second.
what that means, folks, is that we are now into the third bonus hour of our meeting,
Yes.
and specifically designated for the tip.
Bonus round.
This is the bonus hour. That's all. Good in the lobby. Ah, there you go. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry about that. All right, so last year, I think it was last year, FDOT did a study on 56 from near the crosstown up north to Fletcher, I believe, maybe even a little bit further north than that. And they broke the project down into like 5 or 6 segments. The segments that run through Temple Terrace included these intersections. And based on the results of that study, they recommended preferred treatments, right? Or like preferred projects. I don't recall in the study that they identified traffic signals at those intersections, but there were other improvements that could help smooth flow through them. And so DOT is kind of being more generous here, saying, look, you don't need a traffic signal study here, but we have improvements. We'll fund those. Just tell us what you want. And so we're hoping that the city and DOT come to some sort of agreement on what improvements they want to fund. And then next year, those will be really good candidates to fund through this process.
So like whose decision makes to add or not? Like, I mean, you're saying that it's redundant, basically. So the study was done before. So whose decision is to say we're gonna remove it or keep it on here?
So recommend not funding it.
Yes, if
Yeah.
the city is requesting that they want to put this line item in here. Or is the TPO's decision to remove it? Because it's
No,
redundant?
you don't, no. We don't unilaterally make those decisions. When we added this project to the priority list, that was back in January. Since then, we've participated in meetings with Brian McCarthy, like Temple Terrace staff and DOT. Brian Schroyer led that study. And we all agreed, like, let's identify some improvements rather than the study. So we're not taking it out because, you know, it still appeared in their priority request letter. But we're just saying that based on the discussions we've had, we think that Temple Terrace will probably want to fund real improvements rather than a study as soon as they identify what they are.
Okay, so, and then I have another question about Sims Road, also, which is a PG&E project that you were saying that. PG&E project, I don't know what number that was, I know, Christine, you brought it up. Are you also thinking of eliminating that one?
No, not eliminating. The county didn't submit the SU application, so again, like, I don't think that they're ready to get that money to do a study. If they were to submit the SU application and they had sufficient information for us to say, yes, we believe that when constructed, it'll have an impact on safety, then it would be a good candidate. I mean, it's top 20 or almost cracking the top 20. And it's not asking a ton of money for the PD&E, but county didn't submit anything for it this year, so we'll have to wait and see if they want to push it forward next year.
Okay, and I just want to add a comment that due to there's a lot of federal discretionary grants right now with FDOT, and and all the agencies, the county and all the agencies are applying for these grants. There is, the FDOT through the different webinars, they express that they do want studies to be submitted because people haven't been submitting, or agencies and states haven't been submitting enough study requests. And we do have, and they do have a lot of, there's a lot of federal money for studies. And I see that there is a benefit to having studies listed on the tip, because this gives us a chance, a higher chance to get these discretionary grants, because there is a lot of money and we have to show that the feds, that we do want these studies to be done. And because they also expressed that they do want us to apply for more studies. So I'm just, supporting any study or any PD&E preliminary level kind of project on here. I'm not sure exactly how do you change if it's the fund type. Can be just like, to be determined or something. If you don't want to commit to an SU specifically, because there's going to be there's going to be another fund sought out. But I encourage and support any study to continue to stay on the tip.
Yeah, I got you. Just because,
Can we move on down the line, or do we need to continue this discussion? We could have a cup of coffee.
I'm done.
Are we done?
No, I'm done.
Okay. All right, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question on table one. Johnny, the T-BARTA sponsored band pool remains on table one. It's a project that I think is seeking a sponsor. Can you give us an update on how that project may be implemented since we're approving funds?
yeah, so the TPO board committed to funding a certain amount for the band pool operations through fiscal year 26. We've heard that with T-BARTA's dissolution, PSTA is going to take over band pool operations. So our money would go to PSTA to implement the band pool program. But before we release that money, we're looking to get assurances from them that our money is funding trips that either begin or sorry, not either, but begin in Hillsborough, taking commuters to any of the other counties within the region. So yes, the money is still on the table to fund the van pool. It's just not going to T-BARTA, and we're still looking for those assurances.
It's a highly successful program. Thank you.
Okay, let me flip into reverse. Dr. Davison.
Yeah, this is as you ever can see, it's a very complicated document. It's almost like building a quilt. And Johnny, you guys do a great job of cobbling all this different money from all these different sources. And there are projects on here that I don't want, and I'm sure there's projects on here that someone else doesn't want, and we'd like to move it ahead. But this is the order that we have, and they're going to be looking at next week. My question is more systemic. These projects have to be in the long-range transportation plan.
Not specified. So the only projects in the table 2 that have to be specifically called out, meaning they have to have a corridor, project limits like beginning and end points, an estimate of costs, and specific type of analysis like demand modeling, are major projects, widening projects, or mass transit. The other projects are listed in the LRTP based on our project goals. So because the LRTP says that we have a goal to maintain the condition of transit vehicles, pavement, and bridges, that makes projects like bus replacements consistent. And because we have a goal to improve safety by implementing these types of improvements, that makes the Vision Zero projects in the tip consistent. So like, I guess what you're getting at is, if you look at the LRTP, will you see Fletcher Ave from Armenia to Nebraska? No, you won't, but you'll see that we're recommending improving safety with a sample of different types of safety.
The first 5 years of the long-range transportation plan has to be fairly specific. And the next 5 years less so, and 10 years out from there is more general. What I'm getting at is, with the money that we have and that you're expecting, how much of the first 5 years of the long-range transportation plan has been accomplished?
How much has been accomplished? Well, the tip represents the first 5 years of the LRTP. That's why we have that requirement to balance out the costs and revenues. So whatever projects you see in here, in the FDOT work program that have TPO discretionary funds programmed, that's what's going to be accomplished in a nutshell.
But that's not what was formed out for the 2045 plan 5 years ago.
Are you talking?
I'm talking about, because you're in the 2045 plan now, and as it's referenced in here. So the tip that we have now, which is the first 5 years of the 2045 plan. How can that be the first 5 years of the long range transportation plan when it contained a 1 cent sales tax and gas taxes that were, and a CIT tax that were not valid? That's what I'm saying is, if they had the other scenario without the sales tax, you should be able to tell us how far along we got. Otherwise, we're just doing projects and we never have an end game.
I mean, we could.
There's no accomplishment.
Yeah, we could seek to answer that question by tracking how much money is allocated to each investment program, because the trend scenario that you're talking about without the sales tax, we did project how much we would have. And you know, I tried to do that by showing you how much money is allocated to each of the program categories. But to change that, to improve on that would be a change to the LRTP, which is why we're going to have you all give us feedback at the workshop in July.
Okay, if you could email me that and the money allocations for each of these silos for the long run, that would be great.
Okay, I'll see what I can.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, on down the road, Terrence Trott, I see a hand up.
Yes, it just felt it was important to get on the record asking for no delays with anything to do with Gibsonton Road or Big Bend Road. We need to push through as fast as possible, suck up the pain and emerge on the other side, a better region for it. Anything delayed keeps the problem that we're saying now, that things weren't thought of and done ahead of time. So got to do it now and then hopefully plan better in the future, and we'll have a better river view. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, did you have anything? Jerry?
Yes, I've heard a lot of different things addressed here. My pet peeve is the Tico streetcar.
I'm sorry, the what?
Tico streetcar. As far as the request for the operations and extension, Johnny, is that a done deal or is that still in the works?
The new request, we're not recommending any funding for that. That's another one of those projects that falls so far down the list that we've long since extended or exhausted our funds. We could work with City of Tampa. City of Tampa's owning that project. We could work with them to try to identify federal discretionary grants, but the grants available for transit service pale in comparison to other types of projects. So gonna have to snip those out like a chuckle pig. But if they come available, let's go after them.
That's a first. Okay. See what you did?
I mean, the fact that we used to charge back in the day, and now we give those rides away for free, and it's not paying for itself, so. And people in the unincorporated areas of the county are paying, you know, I guess they're paying for it.
Did you have any other specific
No,
questions?
that was it. I go through so much, it's hard to keep them all in check.
Right, okay. Are there any questions or comments from the virtual space? Do we even have anybody in the virtual space anymore?
They only come in.
I think they may have gone down to the road.
I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Before Terrence, yes?
I forgot about the number 22 Sims at 301. To me, that is an important study that needs to happen. There used to be a cow pasture there, now there's a Publix. There's a community across the street from the Publix. 301 is right there. And Sims is a major cut through, alleviating traffic from other roads. People try to cross the street from the community to the Publix with like cars this way, and cars this way. So something should be done there because I think it's a very dangerous area
It is. Yeah.
for all modes of traffic and transport and pedestrian and everybody.
And you're referring to item 22 of the Vision Zero section of table 2, is that correct? That where you're at?
I was naming,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
Okay, and it's project type need additional information to proceed, so that's not something being recommended, right?
The county didn't submit an SU application and as a result, we don't have a scope of services. We don't really know what would be included. But by the county not submitting an SU application, that means that the study is not ready to proceed. So we're in a holding pattern until the county tells us that they want that money. It ranks very highly. You see that 7 crashes per mile. It's a good candidate, but the county didn't ask for money to begin that study. So we can't award it because even if we did, they might not have the staff to take that on right now.
That address your concern?
it does. Again, it's comments to kind of counter. There may have been like a feel of that wasn't such an important thing to study, and I kind of wanted to echo Missy Scene's comments and say that it is, we should push through. If anything we can do with the county or whatever to do that.
I can transmit that comment, let the county staff know that there was a lot of interest from the CAC and moving that forward.
Appreciate
My name on that too.
Okay,
Really quick clarification, sorry. These numbers on the.
Josh Frank is recognized.
Thank you. These numbers on the column here for the priority. That is the priority ranking, is that correct?
Yes.
How is it that that's possible and that the categories are perfectly maintained? Like, how is it that a smart city thing hasn't floated to the top 25? And they're all ranked in the 40s? It's just really confusing.
Yeah, the program categories themselves are ranked based on public engagement that we've done in previous years. So I think that the program categories ranking is state of good repair at the top, followed by Vision Zero, followed by smart cities, then real choices, then major. So that was a big public engagement for the 24 LRTP that yielded like thousands of responses.
I get that, but like item 33 could be ranked 25th. In theory, like this item, this down here in Vision Zero, this could be ranked higher than 33, or is this fixed at 33?
No, it's not fixed. Every
That's what
year,
I'm confused with.
yeah, every year when these projects are funded, they'll be deleted off of priority, or they'll be deleted off of table 2, graduating to table 1. Whatever spots are then opened up, these projects will all move up unless there are new proposed projects. that-
Yeah, I get that. I'm not
Yeah,
communicating
yeah.
like my thought properly, but I'll check it out one.
Okay.
Okay. I have, if everyone else is done with their Q&A, I have a question, Johnny. And I'm gonna refer back to line item 73, the same item that Chris asked a question about. I just wanna diagram this narrative in the project status requests column a little bit. And for the benefit of those of you that are new, this might be of some benefit too. Early works and phases 1 and 2 are already funded for CST. That means construction, correct?
Yes.
Right, so those are items that are under our point of no return definition are already beyond the point of no return.
Right.
Could you remind us, please, what phases 1 and 2 were, are, whatever?
Off the top of my head, no, I can't. The early works was,
Primarily right-of-way acquisition?
yeah, primarily. There was been a lot of delay in that phase alone because some of the property owners were holding out. So phase 3 being funded in fiscal year 28. I wonder if that needs to be updated by DOT at some point, but this information that we got, like this description, is the most current that we've received from them.
Okay, well, let me just follow this along. I'm trying to follow some breadcrumbs here. All right, so phases 1 and 2, and they are otherwise defined in other documents from other years, but we can refer back to them. Those are beyond the point of no return, whatever they are. All right. Phase 3 says to be funded in fiscal year 28. What is phase 3? Do we know? Do you know?
I'm gonna look it up for you right now, see if I can pull that info up on the fly.
I'm pulling up the appendix.
All right, so it looks like it's the northbound lane of Howard Franklin Bridge, before it gets into Tampa. The segment on 275, once you cross over into Tampa, just west of Lois, and then Veterans Expressway from Kennedy north to about Spruce Street. And their website doesn't identify whether those are early works or phases 1 and 2. They're just all kind of lumped in together. So no, off the top of my head, I can't tell you which is included in which phase.
So of all of that, do we know what is currently funded for construction?
Yeah, in table 3, if you want me to pull that up and do some checking with you, I can do that.
If I'm asking for too much on the fly, tell me, maybe it's a different way I can approach this.
You can talk to me, I'll try to pull it up if there's something more specific than that.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to get at, phase 3, whatever it is to be funded in fiscal year 28. That, as I read it, just, being a English speaker and reading the King's English since I was like 2. That means to me that whatever phase 3 is currently not funded for construction.
Right.
So it is not beyond the point of no return. Whatever it is.
Well, I can't say that for sure because I'm not certain of whether it's in design phase or not.
Okay, so part of my problem is I have absolutely no idea what I'm voting for here and whether it's beyond the point of no return or not. This needs much more specificity than that, in my opinion. But in any event, you can't put any more meat on those bones for me. All right, fair enough.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
are you talking about the West Shore interchange?
I'm talking about a line item 73. It's the West Shore interchange. It's sections 4 and 5. that
Okay,
we've
just
been.
want to be sure I've got the right one.
Yeah, no, that's it.
Sorry to interrupt. I
No,
think that project has been fully funded by the state at 1.2 billion.
I don't think it has, but okay. And that's not what this narrative is telling me.
There's more work that needs to be done.
So,
And the
all right,
project was supposed to be completed in 27. So it's interesting now it's in 28.
all right, so hold on. I'm sorry, I have the floor at the moment with Q and A. All right, so phase 3, we're not quite sure what it is, and we're not sure whether it's funded for construction or not. Is that fair at this moment?
There are a ton of FPNs with this. If you want to follow along with me, this is from the FDOT work program. 412-531-1 and -2, 447-107-1, 2, 3, and 4, 447-534-1, 447-614-1. It doesn't identify in their work program what phase they belong to, but that's the segment I-275 from SR60 to Lois, Memorial Highway from Spruce to 275. Let's see, these are all these are all funded, and estimated for completion. The latest is spring 2025. And 2 of those segments are design build in fiscal year 26 and 28.
Okay, again, my
I don't know
confusion
if that- I
is,
don't know if that helps you.
it doesn't really, because my confusion is that phase 3 in the narrative that we've been given to rely upon is to be funded in fiscal year 28. I don't know what those projects are. I don't know what's in phase 3, and if I'm to read this in the common meaning of those words, that would suggest that they are not, whatever they are not yet funded as we sit here today.
I can reach out to DOT and try to get clarification for you. My understanding is the same as Bill's. We've received announcements from FDOT that project's fully funded. If there is a subsequent phase of doing any ancillary improvements after the fact, I don't know what those include.
Okay.
But,
Well, all right, so that's the first 2 lines of that block narrative. The rest is my concern about what follows.
Yeah.
On line 3 of the narrative, additional funding is needed to reconstruct Tampa's West Shore interchange, and then everything that follows from there. So does that suggest that we do not have funding for whatever that is encapsulated within the remainder of that narrative in that block?
I think that might just need to be approved by DOT and deleted. Again, it's my understanding that all the lanes that are part of this project have been funded.
Okay.
I'll reach out to DOT and try to get you an answer for sure, but it's been announced in public domain.
All right, well, that isn't gonna happen tonight, and my concern is that the language we're given here is the language we have to rely on. I've been down this road before with DOT, but the language here is not what's actually happening, and we're being asked to vote on this. So, this is what goes on behind the curtain, and it's just not fair to us, quite frankly. All right, that's all. I
just wanted to be recognized and add that it seems that it is funded, but they want additional funding for that specifically that segment. For that phase, so they're just asking for additional funding to be added to these 2 FM numbers.
Okay,
One and two.
So they're asking for more money.
I agree.
They're asking for more money. It's all funded, but they're asking for more money for this specific segment, which corresponds to the FM numbers that are here listed, -1 and -2.
all right, and you're referring to what in the FPN numbers?
FPN number is the FDOT project number.
No, I know what the alphabet soup means, but what document are you referring to?
I'm referring to what we're looking, this tip,
All right, the FPN number in that, in the column here,
Yeah.
okay.
which also corresponds to the numbers that we were just looking at in the work program. So showing all the FM numbers that are related to this project, which is the West Shore interchange, but they want to add additional funding to phase 3, which are attached to these 2 FM numbers, FPN numbers.
Okay,
So they're just asking for more money.
and the one remaining question, has there been any further discussion about these express lanes being tolled or not tolled?
No, the last conversation happened at last year's public hearing. I can't recall which board member, but I think a motion was made.
Overman.
Commissioner Overman made that motion to delete reference or to specifically add language that would prevent those lanes from being tolled, but I'm not sure if it received a second. If it did, it didn't pass.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Are there any other questions or comments around the room before we start addressing motions? Anything? Okay. Virtual space still dead, Johnny?
Check. Check.
No, want to do a motion. I'm ready for a motion. Motion to pass. To approve.
No hands.
No hands?
No hands, no check.
Okay. The chair recognizes Aya Yassin. Did I pronounce it right this
Yes,
time?
yeah, you've seen.
I mean, I seem to alternate back and forth, doing it right, doing it wrong. Okay, go ahead.
So I would like to propose a motion to approve the tip update. That's it.
All right,
Thank you.
is there a second?
Second.
Second from Dr. Jim Davison. Is there discussion? Mr. Roberts.
Chairman, very briefly, there are a number of items in the major work program category that I support. And I want to mention particularly two items that are under item that are lower than 71. Item number 48 on my schedule, which is probably different than the one we received tonight, has to do with Ashley Drive, some improvements down there around basically around the stress center. I want to particularly support that. And then I want to disclaim that item number 14, which is the proposed widening and improvements on Lynn Turner Road. I support that not only because they're needed, but because the road is named after my wife's family. So, I'll be sure to have that disclaimer on the record.
All righty then. You have to recuse yourself as a result. Mr. Trot.
I'd like to see if I can, I guess,
You want to make a motion to amend?
no, I have a question.
All right.
And it piggybacks off of Mr. Frank's question about the priority on here. And if I may ask Dr. Wong. If we look at number 6 on the list, right, that's good repair, that's the last good repair item. And then number 7 is the first Vision Zero item. Is the Vision Zero item a higher priority than 6 because it's number 1 in Vision Zero, or is it less than number 6 because it's 7?
That's what I was getting.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. No, it is not ranking. Let me look it up so I don't have to speak in generalities. Dill Ave is not ranked higher than Bermuda Boulevard seawall. However, it's a higher priority for us to fund because the Bermuda Boulevard seawall isn't ready to move forward. If Bermuda Boulevard seawall had a funding request and had an application is the critical factor here. Because without that, we don't know how much money the city needs. We can't say yes or no. Until that project is ready to move forward with the application, with the details, with the funding request, we're going to skip over that and look to the next eligible project further down the list.
Understood. But I think the question is still is, yeah, no, okay. All right, so, no, that's fine. So then again, if we went down to number 36, that's the top priority for smart cities. But it's not really rated number 36. It's actually probably like 20 or 15 or something. In essence, because that's the top priority here, and we're going to bypass a lot of Vision Zero stuff.
Of eligible projects. And any project with a complete application with all the information we need to move forward further down the list would be a higher priority for us to recommend funding for than a project toward the top of the list that seems. So if the number 1 priority didn't have an application, we would skip right over that and try to find a project that does have.
I would make a recommendation that a version of this document, you can keep everything in the same order, but actually just really prioritize each project. So right now, it's just a list. I know they're prioritized within their group, but overall, it's just a list. So good repairs from 2 to 6, but that doesn't really represent priorities 2 through 6. Something else is number 4 or 5 from Vision Zero. So then the list should just, you can have each thing can have its number, but they can be ordered according to the way you have it. I think that makes sense.
I got you.
Keep the order of everything, just actually change that priority numbers.
We were talking internally about adding a separate column like funding history or recommendation history, because there are some projects that we recommended funding for that still haven't received it. I think I understand what you're getting at, and I'll work with my team to see if we can address it.
Mr. Hollenkamp,
One
you have a
quick
question?
one. One quick one, Johnny, it seems like in the project status request column, if it says the word request recommended is there, then that's a good one. Doesn't have the word recommended, it's gonna get skipped over, likely.
Right, yes.
Any other questions? We have a motion on the floor that has been duly seconded. We're open for discussion. Proposed amendments. Any song and dance you want along those lines under Robert's rules. Mr. Vella.
I'd like to propose an amendment. As an add-on to the present motion on the floor. I'd like to do a condition to that to remove expressing funding in 73, item 73.
The motion, if I may restate, is to remove express lane funding from line item 73 of table 2 of the tip.
Correct.
State that correctly? All right, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Mr. Frank. Is there any discussion on that motion? Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I mean, we would have to sit here and debate the merits and the problems with congestion management.
Well, we could do that, or we could just.
Not in the next
we could
20
just
minutes.
vote on the motion. We have a
But
motion. and we have a second.
I'm not going to support the amendment because, you know, it's been there, it's been reviewed. It has worked in other places. And as the gentleman said, we need to have these things done yesterday.
Okay, Yassine,
I don't, I will not support the amendment because I don't believe that the word express lanes here will really make a difference, whether we keep it or remove it from that. So removing the whole item would actually not have the project additional funding at all.
okay,
So it's not for the express lanes.
all right. Bill, did you have a hand up? Mr. Roberts?
Hi.
I'm sorry?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay. With
Just a discussion point.
Mr. Vella?
So it's clear that we don't know where the funding is and how it's going to be appropriated. We don't know the details, neither does staff. So we're sitting here voting on something that's exceeding over $1 billion that we have no clue about. 2, these lanes will be activated possibly at best at 2028. So traffic congestion and patterns will be significantly different. To do such an investment right now at this moment, to not only get taxed over billions of dollars in interstate work, but also get told on it. So you're getting double tax on work that is unknown to this board right now. From what I'm hearing from staff, I think is a total misappropriation of judgment. And I think it's flawed judgment. And it does nothing to slow down the work that IDOT has already seeked approval by the board itself. So this amendment will not slow down that process. The interstate work will still continue on. What we're doing is we're removing the parts that we just don't approve. And so that is the whole premise of adding this amendment.
Any other comments from someone I haven't heard from?
No.
30 seconds, Mr. Davis.
I don't agree. I mean, if you took that attitude about what we don't know about in the future, none of these things, because we have no idea. We may not even be here.
Okay, thank you.
Someone had a comment online.
I'm sorry,
Someone had a comment.
Yeah, let me read this.
who's someone?
Jesus Raza Garcia, the Hart rep, said in the chat, tolls are not taxes, they're user fees similar to the bus fare, for example. Not sure he knows about our policy.
Okay, well, hold on a minute. Jesus, I love you, but he's not a member of the CAC, and this is discussion for the CAC at this point. Is there anyone on the virtual space that's actually on the CAC that has any comment?
I don't see any hands raised and no other tracks other than that.
Okay, we have an amendment before us that has been duly seconded by Mr. Frank. If there's no more discussion. 1, 2, 3, no more discussion. I'll ask the secretary please to call the roll on the amendment.
Rick Fernandez,
Aye.
Bill Roberts,
No.
Jim Davison,
No.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Sherry Southwell,
Yes.
Aya Yassin,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
No.
Don Skelton,
No.
Ed Mierzejewski,
No.
Terrence Trott,
No.
Joshua Frank,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
No.
Chris Vella, Sarah Thomas,
No.
Kit Waremeyer.
She wants him to be here.
He's here. I see him online, but I don't know what's going on. And Chris Gonzalez.
No.
The motion fails 10-4.
Okay, takes us back to the original motion made by Aya Yassin. Are there any further amendments to be offered? If not, I'm going to pass the gavel because I have one. Anything? Mr. Hollenkamp? Don't run away with it. This will be short. My amendment relates to line item 73. The major project section. Project type, capacity, operational, and safety enhancements relating to the West Shore interchange. The motion is to add to the project status request column at the very end of the narrative. For line item 73, the words "all lanes will be non-tolled," quote unquote. All lanes will be non-tolled. That's the motion.
Okay, do we have a second?
Actually, a point of order. How is that different from what you just said?
You can still have express lanes that aren't tolled
And how do you do that?
by not tolling them.
And how do you make them express lanes then? Because they're just regular lanes.
They're express lanes that have limited access. You don't pay to
But
get
they're
them.
just regular lanes. I mean, that's
You have express lanes on the Veterans Expressway right
and they're
now.
told.
The express lanes just means that they'll be managed in some way to be decided by the state and board at a later time.
Right.
Including like HOV or bus only.
Okay.
You know, there's other ways that you can manage those lanes.
Yeah, express lane and toll lane are not synonymous. But we've had the question of whether they're going to be tolled or not tolled as an open question now for at least 4 or 5 years. So anyway, that's my amendment.
Okay, and we had a few
Did you get a
people,
second?
Chris Vella seconding it. Is there any discussion? Done? No? Okay, secretary, please take the roll.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Bill Roberts,
No.
Jim Davison,
No.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Sherry Southwell. I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes.
Thank you. Aya Yassin,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
No.
Don Skelton,
No.
Ed Mierzejewski,
No.
Terrence Trott,
Yes.
Joshua Frank,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Chris Vella,
Yes.
Sarah Thomas,
No.
Kurt Waremeyer, Chris Gonzalez.
Yes.
The motion passes 8-7.
Thank you. Okay. All right, that brings us back to the original motion by Aya Yassin. Are there any other further discussions or amendments to the original motion? We will now be voting on the motion as amended.
Wait a minute,
Anything else?
didn't we just vote on the motion as amended?
No, we voted on the amendment, which passed.
Which passed, so now we voted.
So the tip has now been amended.
Our tip has been amended.
Okay.
What we're recommending to the board has been amended to include no express lanes on 73.
No toll.
No tolls. All right, is everyone sufficiently confused? Y'all know what you're voting for. Okay, the motion was to approve the tip as presented. The tip as presented has now been amended. So we are voting on the tip as amended. I'll ask the secretary, please, to call the roll.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Jim Davison,
No.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Sherry Southwell,
Yes.
Aya Yassin,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Murszewski.
No.
I'm sorry, was that a no?
Yes, no, it was a.
Correct. It was a no. Is that correct? Okay. Joshua Frank,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Chris Vella,
Yes.
Sarah Thomas,
Yes.
Kit Weremeyer, and Chris Gonzalez.
Yes.
Motion passes 11-3.
Hold on, a moment. What?
I didn't get a vote.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Terrence Trot.
No,
No,
is my vote.
The motion still passes 11-4.
wow.
Are we
Yeah,
gonna stick to this 9 o'clock end time?
I'm intending to. In the past, I have given everyone the option at 8 o'clock to adjourn. That's what we've done since I took over the chair. For this one meeting, I asked for an extra hour so that we would be able to do exactly what we've been doing. I know we still have some other items here among the unfinished business and the status reports, and I promised Aya that I would come back to her on something. I don't know what yet. So we've still got 5 minutes. How about we try to stretch it as best we can? Aya, did you have something that you wanted to present?
I just wanted to make, I don't know if like it would be like a recommendation or a motion, but I want to go back to the bicycle network evaluation, and I would like the TPO staff to reevaluate the methodology, kind of rework it and bring it back to the CAC next meeting.
All right, so I take that as a request to put that on our agenda for, I guess, August. So we'll have an opportunity to review and consider it again in advance of the board's review in August. Is that fair? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Thank you.
Is that it? Is that all?
Thank you, Chair.
All that was? Okay,
That's all I-
well, thank you. I'm glad that we got back to you. All right, y'all look hungry. First part, Mr. Vella?
Yeah, I was just gonna see if I can present a motion to defer status reports to the July CSA meeting.
You don't need a motion. We're deferring.
Oh, you are, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's going to be a call from the chair.
Just,
We don't have a July a regular July meeting. What are we doing?
Right, in July, we're doing a special workshop to review the assumptions of the cost revenue needs assessment. The initial steps to developing the 2050 long-range plan were presented a couple months back, maybe even longer than that. But this committee had a number of questions about how we're generating our assumptions of what proportion of each revenue source will be allocated to transportation, and that's a heavy topic. So we're looking to have a special workshop in July. It'll be on the 12th, Wednesday, not the 12th Wednesday, Wednesday the 12th. And we're gonna have our speakers come back and bring the consultants going over all of those revenue assumptions.
And that's gonna be an optional meeting in terms of attendance.
Yeah, optional. It won't come against you.
Is that gonna be at 6?
Ordinarily, we take the July month off.
Okay.
So we're putting a little extra work on ourselves, and it's gonna be in the form of a workshop, and it is optional.
Just a quick announcement, just everybody on the June 20th, FDOT's gonna have a meeting over the downtown interchange, and that's gonna be at the Ferguson Law Center on Tampa Street. That's June 20th at 5:30. Please be there and get some more information on it.
Mr. Frank?
Just very quickly, by my count, looking at the attendance report, we have, I think, 5 vacancies. You mentioned 2 folks going before the board. I know Hart is advertising for an open position actively. So I would just encourage staff to keep working to fill those positions so we can have a full and robust participation. And second, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Business.
You're
You weren't recognized for that, Frank.
No.
Make sure there wasn't anything else that needed to be addressed.
We have a discussion about the motion to adjourn. I have one question.
Yes,
Thank you. Johnny, is this US 301 item C on our status reports? Is that going to be presented to the TPO before we meet again?
That'll be presented at their August meeting. We can have a meeting August 2nd and it's even will hear it on that time.
We're going to be
the reason-
absolutely get through and talk about
Is it okay if I take just 1 minute?
yeah,
The reason why I wanted to present the PD&E studies for US 41 and US 301 is because the opportunity to comment has already passed, but the TPO board will still be receiving comments on that. So if you want to make any, if we have time at the August meeting, you can still make them and we'll transmit them to the board. I think it would be proactive to review the materials and then go on the FBOT website and log your comments there.
and I just wanted, one thing that I did not do when she walked in the room, short at the beginning of the meeting. Dana Lazarus is sitting over here in the corner. She is our second, what do we call you? A nominee designate, I suppose, that will be adjudicated by the board at their meeting next week. So with any luck, we'll have both of these fine folks sitting around this table by July or certainly by August. Any other questions before we drop the gavel? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Johnny.